Wuha Military Camp is the site of the Japan Self-Defense Forces 13th Brigade, with about 3,600 soldiers stationed there. As Wuha Military Camp was bombarded by the surprise helicopter assault, Miao Luan and other steel soldiers also rappelled down from the Mi-8 helicopter. Click! Carrying a 14.5mm anti-aircraft machine gun, Miao Luan led the charge toward a barracks building that housed soldiers. That barracks building had not been hit by air-to-surface rockets. Its combat effectiveness was intact, and given that the barracks consisted of an armory, equipment room, storage room, and supply depot, 3 rooms and 1 depot structure, with all weapons stationed at the entrance on the first floor, it meant that the Japanese soldiers inside the barracks, once startled awake, aside from those who were in panic and disoriented, a large number hurried downstairs. The camp is under enemy attack by JECA Group's forces. Enemy infantry are parachuting inside the camp. There are many helicopters. Drive them out immediately and bring the shoulder-fired air defense missiles. A company-level officer was frantic, opening the armory on the first floor, quickly handing out loaded rifles, rocket launchers, man-portable air defense missiles, and other weapons to every soldier that passed by. What's happening? What exactly is going on? We're at war. JECA Group is attacking us. Damn it, how dare they? I saw the barracks in Area C, Block 2, half collapsed, and many people are dead. There are bodies everywhere. There were successive cries of alarm, and most of the soldiers were still confused, instinctively obeying the officer's orders, grabbing their guns and ammunition, and running out of the barracks in a flurry. However, these Japanese soldiers did not realize that stepping out of the barracks was the beginning of their nightmare. Behind his mask, Miao Luan's gaze was sharp as a hawk's, radiating a chill, as if closely watching every move of his prey. When he saw a large number of Japanese soldiers filing out of the barracks, Miao Luan didn't hesitate for a moment and pulled the trigger of the machine gun. Bang! 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 The next moment, a long tongue of flame sprayed from the gun barrel, and the powerful recoil caused Miao Luan's body to slightly quiver. Bullets with tens of thousands of joules of kinetic energy whizzed out. Their power was overwhelming for human targets. Some 20 soldiers who had just run out of the barracks were cut down like wheat under a scythe, directly bursting into incomplete chunks of corpses. Most soldiers were severed at the waist, blood and viscera spreading all over the ground, leaving almost no whole bodies. Miao Luan's expression did not change. The gun barrel turned, and the large 14.5mm bullets directly swept into the first floor of the barracks, turning the soldiers inside who were arming themselves into a bloody mess, with limbs and body parts scattered everywhere. The company-level officer who had just been boosting morale, half of his body was blown apart. It wasn't that the soldiers didn't think to fight back, but most of their weapons were simply not a threat to Miao Luan. And Miao Luan's slaughter was extremely fierce. Armed with a 14.5mm machine gun, he was unstoppable. This weapon's effective range exceeded 2,300 meters with high muzzle velocity, long range, and flat trajectory. Ordinary light weapons could not resist it. It's the Super Soldier, JECA Group's indestructible super soldiers. Can't penetrate, need to use sniper rifles and rocket launchers. Don't stick your head out, you'll get shot dead. In just a minute, the soldiers in the barracks were scared out of their wits, rolling and crawling back behind wall cover, planning to wait for Miao Luan to enter, to ambush him with various individual heavy weapons by making use of visual obstruction. Calling Eagle Falcon, strike the barracks in front of me. There's a large enemy force inside, enemy position. Repeat, strike. Miao Luan didn't rashly go in, nor did he choose to directly use 14.5mm bullets to break the wall and create a path. Although he could do so, his weapon's muzzle energy was higher than the famous Barrett's, definitely capable of penetrating thin reinforced concrete. But the ammunition he personally carried was limited, and it was inconvenient to keep replenishing via helicopters, so leaving this task to the armed helicopters was fitting. On the outside of the camp, several armed helicopters responsible for fire support were striking nearby air defense units, clearing obstacles for other helicopters. Their attack plan involved the entire group of armed helicopters rotating in circles, executing a carousel tactic, continuously providing fire support to ground targets. At this time, a Ka-52 armed helicopter that received the call changed direction, nosedived down, and quickly flew over the area. After confirming the target with Miao Luan, the Ka-52 armed helicopter took an attack stance. The 30mm caliber machine gun under the belly of the helicopter spat out a flame several meters long, and high-explosive tracer bullets the size of wine bottles and as thick as an arm easily pierced through reinforced concrete. Upon penetration, if they encountered a human body, they would shatter the entire person. Even if they didn't directly hit a body, the warhead's built-in shaped charge and contact fuse would explode, and the high-explosive bombs blast, containing a bit more explosive than a grenade, would spray shrapnel to kill enemies within several meters. Accompanied by billows of white smoke, the barracks turned into a slaughterhouse, filled with screams and wails. The helicopter continued its burst for 20 seconds, firing nearly half of its machine gun ammunition. Finally, the Ka-52 helicopter flew over the barracks, and a FAB-500 type air bomb detached from its mount, delivering the last blow. Indeed, this Russian-supplied armed helicopter was capable of carrying air bombs, mainly because they were too poor to afford a lot of precision-guided munitions. Boom! The barracks collapsed on one side, and bodies were blown away. Although basic, the power of these air bombs was undeniable, instantly eliminating the last of the barracks' viable forces on the spot. Miao Luan stepped back, looking toward other parts of the battlefield. As the battle fully entered the rhythm of the Jeka group, super soldiers rampaged below in the camp, eliminating all Japanese soldiers in their sight. These super soldiers were precise in shooting, fierce in firepower, and strong in defense. Ordinary rifles were mostly harmless, unable to penetrate their armor. However, those weapons that could cause damage weren't easy to deploy against the agile and keenly sense-driven super soldiers. But war was cruel, and casualties were likewise inevitable among the Jeka group. Miao Luan saw a super soldier get pinned down by several machine guns. Smoke led him to a misjudgment, and he carelessly was shot through the face mask by a heavy sniper, his body wavering as it fell. Miao Luan couldn't afford to grieve. As he swung his gun around, firing at the sniper's hiding building, the bullets going through the walls and bursting the concealed sniper. Afterward, he turned his gun again to suppress those emerging machine gunners. With the support of armed helicopters circling above, each point of resistance was rapidly eliminated. "Kill all these Japanese bastards!" Miao Luan shouted in anger, and when his ammunition ran out, he directly seized an enemy machine gun to use. Inspired, many super soldiers became even more reckless and fearless, turning the military camp into a river of blood. "Ha-ha, Captain! I'm sending all these damn dogs to hell." A super soldier wielding a Gatling gun, with the barrel spinning rapidly, unleashed a dense barrage of bullets that ripped through the bodies of several Japanese soldiers. Enemy bullets came shooting in, clanging lively against the battle armor, but it did hardly any harm. The super soldier, with the Gatling gun, advanced step by step, chilling the hearts and shaking the courage of the Japanese soldiers. The 35th, the 36th, the 37th, another super soldier, wielding an anti-material sniper rifle, lay at the camp's high point, muttering with each kill. The keen senses enhanced by the strengthening pill made their eyes as sharp as an eagle's. Within a kilometer range, they accurately sniped those holding rocket launchers and machine guns. Many high-threat infantrymen didn't get a chance to retaliate before being disembodied by bullets from nowhere. Some super soldiers carried double-layered flamethrowers, modified to be wider and thicker, which were immune to routine bullets. "Little Japanese, Grandpa invites you to a barbecue." This super soldier roared, holding a flamethrower in each hand, sweeping left to right, with roaring fire dragons spewing up to 100 meters in high-temperature flames, drastically raising the air's temperature. Many soldiers hiding in shelters and buildings, facing this unreasonable flamethrower, were immediately ignited and turned into burning figures, screaming as they ran out from cover, and after excruciating pain, they collapsed and were burned into charred corpses. Demons. They are a group of demons that have burrowed out from the depths of the earth. We're doomed, completely doomed. How did we provoke these devils? It's mecha, like those from the cartoons. We stand no chance against them. Those damn politicians. Why did they send us here to endure such a wretched journey through hell? I want to go home. Let me go home. I don't want to die here. The morale of the Japanese soldiers was rapidly declining as they faced the godlike super soldiers, feeling only that the enemy were ferocious butchers, and they were merely lambs awaiting slaughter. Even though these super soldiers were extremely few in number, their individual combat effectiveness was far too terrifying. Wherever they went, it was difficult for many Japanese soldiers to be left with whole bodies. After killing several more Japanese soldiers, Miao Luan, following the prearranged plan, headed towards a strategic warehouse. The warehouse, filled with plenty of military ammunition aided by the Eight Nation Group, was located in the Wuha military camp, intended to resupply the front lines upon the outbreak of war. The air assault group attacked this location not only to kill Japanese soldiers but to destroy this critical strategic munitions depot. This strategic munitions depot, already subjected to multiple rounds of bombardment by armed helicopters, was exceptionally sturdy to withstand such firepower, and the bombings had not destroyed it. Miao Luan hurried to the strategic warehouse, kicked open the wobbly twisted steel door, and burst in alone. Damn! It's the enemy! Open fire quickly. Don't let him come in. There were still quite a few soldiers present because the strategic warehouse was so robustly constructed, it had become a target for the Japanese soldiers to hide. Miao Luan swung his gun horizontally. The chain of bullets trembled rapidly, and the bullets continuously pierced through bodies, soon forcing these soldiers to surrender in a horrific state, all raising their hands. Open the blast doors to the strategic warehouse or die. Miao Luan looked at them coldly, and without much hesitation, he pulled the trigger, randomly killing a few more. I'll open it. I'll open it. Please don't kill me. Seeing Miao Luan, a veritable killing star, the logistics officer could only stand up tremblingly and proceed to open the multi-layered defenses of the strategic warehouse. Soon, Miao Luan witnessed a scene he would never forget. Densely packed munitions and ammunition, bullets and shells of various calibers, and a large amount of armor and individual weapons. Miao Luan knew he had come to the right place. He took out the timed explosives he had brought, threw it into a pile of high-explosive air bombs, set the detonation timer, and then withdrew. The soldiers outside had all run off. He had just left the warehouse when Miao Luan's ears twitched, and he quickly ducked into a corner. From a distance, an armored vehicle that had driven out of the warehouse opened fire on him, the large-caliber machine gun creating deep pits in the ground. A moment slower, and he would have been turned into mincemeat. This military camp housed a tank battalion and several armored platoons, and some undamaged armored units were desperately driven out by the Japanese soldiers. This was also their best method against super soldiers. Battle armor under the pounding of machine guns and high-explosive bombs was as penetrable as paper. The fierce firepower also made evasion extremely difficult, and these armored units would severely restrict the capabilities of super soldiers. However, the battlefield was not limited to super soldiers. In the sky, there were numerous armed helicopters, these aerial vehicles known as the bane of ground armored units, the tank killers. Here we go. The helicopter pilots laughed heartily as the anti-tank missiles loaded on them flew out of their launch nests. Barely a minute after a tank had driven out of the hangar, an anti-tank missile fell from the sky, poured through the tank's vulnerable top, and the shaped charge warhead activated, penetrating the tank's interior in an instant. Boom! The crew inside was almost wiped out instantly. The tank emitted black smoke and fire, followed by the explosion of internal ammunition that sent the tank's turret flying 10 meters into the air, crashing onto the ground as if saluting in surrender. Scenes like this happened repeatedly on the battlefield. Armor vehicles and tanks became live targets for the helicopters above. As soon as they showed their heads, they were locked in by anti-tank missiles, their own air defense missiles having no chance to launch. On the ground, Japanese soldiers fired man-portable air defense missiles from their shoulders, while helicopters evaded by releasing flares and maneuvering wildly. These Japanese soldiers would soon face attacks from super soldiers. Armed helicopters struggled to find these stealthy individual anti-air soldiers, but for super soldiers it posed no problem at all. Super soldiers and helicopters coordinated seamlessly, one striking armored units and providing fire support, the other attacking the remaining enemy infantry. Under this dual assault, Japanese soldiers began to collapse. Initially, it was just small groups of soldiers turning to run, but soon this retreat spread like a plague. Up till now, more than 1,000 Japanese soldiers had died in the military camp, and countless more were injured. This had surpassed the casualty threshold that these Japanese soldiers could withstand. "Commander, we found the command building. We're engaging. Do you want to capture a few high-ranking officers and take them back?" An excited voice came through the communication, and Miao Luan, who was about to issue a retreat order, suddenly brightened up. If they could capture high-ranking Japanese officers early in the battle, it would undeniably be a slap in the face. "Good. Send me the coordinates." Soon, Miao Luan also arrived at the command building, joined several super soldiers, and fought their way in. Upon reaching the command room, it was dazzling with officers. The ranks were of assistant officer level, first, second, third assistant officers, and even a high-ranking official equivalent to Major General of other countries with 2 stars on his uniform. Japanese military ranks differ from most other countries. This level of official could be compared to the Major General of other nations, which delighted Miao Luan, as it was a grand harvest indeed. "Bastards! You cruel bastards! My great empire of Japan will never admit defeat." An officer cursed angrily, actually drawing his samurai sword and chopping it down on Miao Luan's forehead. Clang! The commander's sword left a white mark on the battle armor, but instead broke a notch in itself. "Do you think you're a Superman? Idiot!" Miao Luan indifferently grabbed the samurai sword. His opponent's face turned red with strain, but still he couldn't pull it out. Is this little guy suffering from Chinibu? What's he thinking, trying to chop with a sword? Boss. Maybe he thinks he's a swordsman from One Piece, able to cut through metal with one strike. Can you all stop making me laugh? We're in the middle of a battle. The super soldiers laughed uproariously. The scene was just too ridiculous. In this day and age, still playing with cold weapons against battle armor that a rifle couldn't penetrate. Thinking a samurai sword could cut through it was a joke. A group of Japanese officers were filled with despair. Their only weapons for self-defense were the pistols and ceremonial swords for show. How could they resist these steel soldiers who were like wolves and tigers? The Major General's hand trembled as he pointed at Miao Luan and the others, his voice quivering. "You initiate war on your own. Offend Japan. Offend the entire Western world. Now you may be smug, but once the Empire reacts, you will soon face our retaliation. Then we'll see who can still smile. Luan Valley, what's this old guy babbling about? Translate it for me, will you? Your Japanese is good." Miao Luan stared at the man as one of the super soldiers behind him translated. After hearing the translation, Miao Luan sneered, "Heh, whether or not we'll face retaliation is another matter. But for now, you better behave." With that, Miao Luan threw a powerful punch into the Major General's abdomen. The immense force on the spot made him vomit up his overnight meal and curl up on the ground. Grabbing his neck and lifting him like a dead dog, Miao Luan grabbed the Major General, disarmed him of his sidearm, and led him straight out of the command center. The other super soldiers followed suit, though not as gently as Miao Luan. Some dragged Japanese officers by the leg across the ground. Others slapped them so hard that teeth flew out. These officers were utterly powerless to resist the violence of the super soldiers, and one by one they were dealt with in extremely wretched ways. Outside the military camp, there were no organized Japanese soldiers left resisting. Those remaining were either fleeing or too scared to come out from behind buildings and cover. Even as Miao Luan captured their regiment leader, these self-defense force soldiers had no intention of attempting a rescue. Upon seeing this, the captured Japanese Major General's eyes filled with anguish as he cursed. "Those wasters in the Air Force. Why is there no support yet? Clumsy idiots. Even if they're slow, they should have arrived by now." This was the most incomprehensible thing to him. He had already reported the attack. The main command must have dispatched fighters by now, and given the speed of aircraft, they should have arrived long ago. If the fighters could reach Wuha military camp, those helicopters would have been shot down one by one. There's no way they would have been able to rampage until now. Without the helicopters, the remaining super soldiers would have nowhere to retreat and would be eliminated one by one. The Major General had thought out a perfect response, but the reality was vastly different from what he had imagined. Even now, he hadn't seen a single fighter jet appear, and his patience finally broke into curses. Miao Luan, not understanding what the other was saying but seeing his expression, thought he was being insulted and threw another punch, immediately quieting the man down. All units, begin an orderly retreat from the battlefield. Our mission is over. After issuing the retreat signal, the Mi-8 helicopters in the sky began to descend, and the blood-stained steel soldiers rapidly climbed aboard the cabin. Miao Luan, carrying the Japanese Major General in one hand and holding onto the cabin door with the other, felt the wind whipping up debris on the ground. As the helicopter slowly ascended, Miao Luan gazed at the entire Wuha military camp. The once orderly camp was now a scene of devastation, with smoke and flames rising everywhere, soldiers' cries heard across the fields, and bodies in pieces strewn about. He also saw some dazed Japanese soldiers, some still alive but with their skulls blown open, standing in place, lifeless. Some soldiers dragged their shattered legs, crawling hundreds of meters on the ground, leaving behind blood trails that were a sight to behold. Some held their spilled guts in their hands, calling out for doctors and medics, running back and forth in search of someone to save them. Some Japanese soldiers were missing jaws, faces, or arms, sheared off by flying shrapnel. Miao Luan even saw a soldier shot in the arm, biting down on his artery to avoid bleeding to death. The stench of blood permeated the battlefield, the camp like a giant meat grinder consuming the lives of the Japanese soldiers one by one. The air assault by the ground attack group was undoubtedly a success. Their surprise attack had all but crippled the 13th Brigade of the Japan Self-Defense Force, forcing the enemies, who had been so arrogant before the battle, to pay a heavy price. In contrast, JECA Group had lost 4 helicopters in the attack, with 6 first-class super soldiers killed and 5 injured. Compared to crippling a brigade of 3,600 personnel, such a result was exceedingly disproportionate. Miao Luan had long known the cruelty of war and showed little emotion on his face. He merely checked the time and told the helicopter pilot to speed up. As the helicopter fleet retreated into the distance, Miao Luan, sitting near the helicopter door, suddenly squinted as a blinding light burst out, and a mushroom cloud reaching 600 or 700 meters skyward arose. The strategic depot had detonated, setting off a chain of explosions from the countless pieces of military ammunition stored inside. The powerful blast wave carried a wild wind, and even from a great distance, one could feel its terrifying power. Many people began to record this heart-stopping scene. With this battle, we crush these most arrogant Japanese soldiers and let them understand that they are nothing special. My JECA Group can completely eradicate them. Miao Luan removed his mask, pointing at the giant mushroom cloud with one hand, and gripping a Japanese Major General with the other. Under his wind-blown hair was a face of steely resolve, his eyes bright as torches. Click, click, click. The accompanying military photographers pressed their shutters, capturing this iconic moment, planning to distribute it to the major media outlets after the war, so the world could witness Japan's misery. Amid the cheers and laughter of the super soldiers, the entire air assault team flew at ultra-low altitudes, skimming the ground to avoid radar detection, carrying a group of victorious ace pilots back home. Oh! When the battle at Wuha military camp concluded, there were, in fact, simultaneous battles erupting in other parts of Chan country, some even predating the fight at Wuha military camp. Xavier Airport, the sole military airport within G State's territory, was also a newly constructed field airport. As a forward airport, it was the storage site for Chan country's frontline warplanes. Chan country's airplanes were relatively outdated, but in Southeast Asia, if it could fly, drop bombs, and fire missiles, it was considered an upscale aircraft. Now Chan country had received quite a few outdated model warplanes as aid from the 8-nation group, but to the Chan country government, they were still treasured assets. In response to the threat from JECA Group, 1/4 of Chan country government's operational aircraft were parked here, representing one of the government army's few valuable assets. At dawn, when the sky was just lighting up, the airport was already engulfed in a sea of flames. Another team of helicopters flying at low altitude arrived, and the Chan country soldiers, loosely trained at the airport, were thrown into disarray by the sudden helicopter attack. The armed helicopters' rocket pods trembled frantically as a barrage of aerial rockets, anti-tank missiles, and large-caliber machine guns plowed through the airport. The planes parked on the tarmac and in hangars were doomed. Several Sky Dome Eagles were blasted on the ground before they could even take off, twisted and decomposed into piles of scrap. There were more than 20 aircraft at the airport, a mix of fighters, attackers, and some armed helicopters. But no matter how powerful these warplanes were once airborne, dominating and ravaging ground forces, they were sitting ducks on the ground, vulnerable to any rocket that could tear them apart. With the incessant roars of explosions inside the airport, most of the Chan country warplanes were destroyed directly inside the hangars. On the other side, a few struggling fighters attempted to glide and take off from the runway. But the landing super soldiers did not show them any mercy. Large-caliber anti-aircraft machine guns tore through the alloy outer shells of the fighters, damaging the delicate internal components and electronic equipment. The pilot's cockpit glass was penetrated. They were killed instantly in their seats, condemning these tens of tons of warplanes to immediate scrap. More super soldiers charged towards the flight crew barracks, wielding various heavy weapons, and commenced a massacre. These pilots included not only those trained by the Chan Country Government Army but also a portion of pilots who were mercenary hires aided by the Eight Nation Group. Since the Chan Country Government did not have enough pilot talents, supporting only the warplanes would be futile. The government couldn't operate them. Hence, pilots were part of the bundled support that came with the planes. Evelyn, no. Pal, a pilot from beautiful country, had bloodshot eyes as he watched a female pilot who had come with him get her upper body shredded by a steel soldier wielding a machine gun. His secretly adored goddess vanished in an instant. Anger led him to lose his sanity, and he picked up a rifle, ready to fight to the death. However, as he stepped out of the barracks and saw the dead bodies everywhere, with pilots, ground service personnel, and maintenance technicians brutally slaughtered, his courage and blood heated by anger were immediately doused with a bucket of ice water. Fearfully swallowing, Pal started to regret and wanted to retreat into the barracks. Unfortunately, the super soldier's bullet reached him first. As Pal felt a dizzy spell, seeing a familiar headless corpse, he realized in shock that it was his own body. In the next moment, endless darkness swallowed his consciousness. Kill all these pilots. They are all high-value targets, the commander shouted loudly. The more we kill, the less our airspace will suffer from intrusion. One by one, the super soldiers kicked open the doors and charged into every hidden place, massacring any concealed pilots and ground technicians, the scent of blood heavy in the air. It costs a lot to train a pilot, but to kill them, only a single bullet is needed. Following the near-complete obliteration of the pilots at the airport, the super soldiers swiftly returned to the helicopters and departed. Before this air assault team left, they also attacked the airport's runway, blasting it full of craters, rendering it unusable for takeoffs and landings for some time. Southern Chan Country, Yang Province, Putua Airport. This airport is a permanent 4F military airport. The so-called 4F level refers to the length and width of the airport runway. The larger the number, the longer the runway. A 4F level airport has a runway length of at least 1,800 meters and a width of several dozen meters, capable of accommodating the takeoff and landing of behemoths like the Boeing 737 and Airbus A380. Unlike the Xavier Airport, a field airport, Putua Airport has numerous permanent buildings and fully equipped facilities, naturally possessing strong defensive capabilities. Especially after receiving funds from the Eight Nation Group, the other 7 countries came with their own provisions to further reinforce and expand the airport. Many ammunition and fuel depots, constructed with thick rebar and concrete, are partially buried deep within mountains and underground. Nowadays, Putua Airport is the largest military airport within the borders of Chan Country. The majority of the fighter jets within Chan Country, including the Aviation Mixed Group from Japan, are resting and stationed here. Putua Airport, located in the south of Chan Country, is quite remote from East Chin State. Its primary purpose is to protect the essential coastal cities of southern Chan country. But considering the operational radius of fighter jets, this distance isn't really a problem. They can cover and strike the airspace of East Chin State just the same. Previously, those Japanese fighter jets took off and landed from here. Even the outdated jets, by simply carrying auxiliary fuel tanks and carrying less munitions, could fly over East Chin State and maintain combat efficacy. At the same time as the battles in Wuha Military Camp and Xavier Airport erupted. Putuo Airport, being closest to the western side of Chan country and due to the rotation of Blue Star, had not yet seen dawn, with only a faint light visible on the horizon. In a dense forest tens of kilometers east of Putuo Airport, where the ground covered in dead branches and leaves was noticeably arched, a gigantic and grotesque head emerged. Immediately afterward, an 80-meter-long train-width, hideous giant creature appeared on the ground, crushing several towering trees in its vicinity. The weather's pretty good today. Su Jie leapt down from the back of the thousand-hand centipede, looking up through the dense forest canopy towards the sky dome. His primordial spirit leapt out from the top of his physical body. Despite the great distance, Su Jie didn't feel any intense sensation of being scrutinized. This suggested that there were probably no satellites repositioning to surveil this area from their corresponding orbital trajectories above. However, just to be cautious, Su Jie took out a portable array map, secured it, and activated a formation called Bibo Cloud Mist Array inside it, letting a faint mist spread throughout the surroundings. In this manner, even if there were satellites changing orbits above or reconnaissance planes and thermal imaging or the like, they wouldn't be able to discern the silhouette of the thousand-hand centipede. After completing all this, Su Jie released a batch of human-faced moths to act as reconnaissance cameras. He then took out a storage bag and extracted several huge artillery shells, almost as tall as 2 people and weighing 7 to 8 tons each. Caressing the cold shell of the artillery, Su Jie knew that these specially made shells, designed under his direct orders, were custom-ordered from Mauzi. When the experts from Russia first heard of Su Jie's specifications, they were baffled and almost thought they were manufacturing World War II-era giant train guns. But such enormous cannonry, in the age of missiles, had no place on the battlefield. Today, it's all about you big guns. Su Jie shifted his focus, already having dispatched scouting insects to Putuo Airport. Using the insect control technique and pushing the limits of his reconnaissance range, he continually received updates about the situation at the airport. Seeing that Putuo Airport was still oblivious to the impending danger, Su Jie's lips curved into a cold smile. Xiao Qian, combined technique, train gun form, ZZZT. Hearing Su Jie's command, the thousand-hand centipede joyfully cried out twice. One after another, pale corpse hands thicker than thighs quickly crawled up, climbing onto the centipede's back. The densely packed corpse hands entwined and solidified with each other, and innumerable small centipedes acted as lubricants, defensively growing layers of scales for reinforcement. 1 minute later, a 30-meter-long cannon with an 800-millimeter diameter quietly tilted upwards on the back of the thousand-hand centipede. The cannon, entirely constructed of corpse hands, centipedes, scales, and various Tianyuan world spiritual materials, revealed pulsating flesh and centipede joints within. Su Jie hoisted a 7-ton shell, sliding it directly into the barrel. The corpse hands inside the barrel lightly touched and turned, lodging this heavy shell deep into the cannon. Distance 25.8 kilometers. Southwest wind. No big issue. Su Jie leaped onto the centipede's back, his palms covering the flesh cannon, intense electricity sparking from his palms. The purple cloud heavenly thunder was controlled by Su Jie in terms of power and current, coursing into the barrel. The current circulated in a powerful magnetic field. Even Su Jie's hair crackled with purple arcs as he fully immersed himself in precise manipulation, finally shouting, "Xiao Qian, lock onto the target, elevate the muzzle 35 centimeters. Ready for a test fire." The thousand-hand centipede's body shook violently, its pale corpse hands burrowing deeply into the ground, serving as braces like a gun carriage's spade. ZZZT, ZZZ. With 2 short and 1 long cries, the thousand-hand centipede signaled its readiness. Roar, Xiao Qian train gun, fire. With a push from Su Jie's hand, a powerful electric current erupted, generating a strong magnetic field propulsion. Boom! Within the flesh and blood cannon barrel, a gigantic shell weighing several tons rapidly drilled out, flying at hundreds of meters per second towards the Putuo airport more than 20 kilometers away. About halfway through its flight, the lower half of the shell was covered with numerous pale corpse hands, resembling the tentacles of a jellyfish. By this time, these pale corpse hands had reached the limit of the thousand-hand centipede's control range. One by one, the palms of the pale corpse hands slightly cracked open, and faint high-temperature beams burst out continuously, much like a rocket's second-stage boost, allowing the shell, whose force was waning, to keep flying and also to slightly adjust the shell's course for increased precision. Oh! Putuo Airport. Inside the radar room, a radar soldier, seeing the sudden appearance of a flying object signal, incredulously rubbed his eyes. After triple-checking and confirming that it wasn't a radar error and comparing the size and speed of the flying object on the radar screen, he suddenly shouted, "Enemy attack! Cruise missiles incoming! Air defense alert!" The air defense alarm instantly resounded throughout the entire Putuo airport, waking up many soldiers who were still asleep. They ran out of their barracks in a panic, only to see a horrifying scene they would never forget. A long, train horn-like wail came from the sky, and a dark shadow flashed by above, landing at the apron on the north side of the airport. The next second, all the soldiers at the airport felt the ground shaking. A dust and smoke column more than 100 meters high rose into the air, and the powerful shockwave, like a rolling tsunami, tossed nearby fighter jets around like toys, directly flipping and tearing them apart, scattering various parts clanging to the ground hundreds of meters away. The soldiers who were on night shift duty nearby the explosion didn't even have time to hum before their flesh and blood bodies were shattered into mincemeat. Even those 200 meters away were thrown several meters by the shock wave, their internal organs displaced, vomiting blood profusely, inhaling more than exhaling, clearly not going to survive. The explosion's force spread over the area of several football fields, leaving a giant crater in its wake. The explosive force, surpassing that of a conventional warhead cruise missile, dumbfounded every soldier who witnessed it. Damn! What the hell was that? What kind of missile is bombing us? Scramble the fighters. Get them the hell airborne for combat. Where exactly did the enemy attack us from? Radar. Detect immediately and lock onto the enemy's firing position. The airport was in chaos. The soldiers were stunned by the astonishing explosive force. Su Jie, from afar, watched through reconnaissance insects and nodded in satisfaction at the destructive effect of his shell. Hey! It looks like my combo technique wasn't wasted. The effects are pretty good. Su Jie then hoisted another shell, loading it into the cannon barrel before patting the head of the thousand-hand centipede. After a brief aiming period, another shell howled out. The sound waves and shock waves near the muzzle were immense, breaking the surrounding trees. The powerful recoil caused hundreds of the pale corpse hands that burrowed deep underground to break, leaving deep grooves in the ground. Boom! The second shell had been aimed at the runways, intending to make the planes unable to take off and become easy targets. However, this shell went astray, landing in the repair hangar instead, where various equipment and airplane parts were stored. They were destroyed in the violent explosion, leaving a crater large enough to be used as a swimming pool, the shockwave spreading out, turning over 100 soldiers into airborne figures. Xiao Qian, you damn missed! Su Jie poked at the forehead of the thousand-hand centipede, speaking irritably. Sizzle! The thousand-hand centipede made a somewhat aggrieved sound, with a few corpse hands covering their eyes, not daring to look at Su Jie. Again, don't miss this time. While Putuo Airport was hurriedly fueling and arming fighter jets, Su Jie had already finished reloading on his end. Since it wasn't a real heavy artillery, Su Jie didn't have to consider heat dissipation and complex feeding. The flesh and blood inside the cannon barrel, once destroyed by the electric current, could be simply replaced with a new batch of pale corpse hands, a process simpler than modular components of modern machinery by thousands of times. Third shell, target runway, fire. The muzzle elevated, accompanied by the stimulation of the electrical current. The shell was once again pushed out of the barrel, heading straight for the airport 25 kilometers away. After about a minute in the air, the shell fell heavily. At the airport, high-altitude artillery and air defense missiles tried to intercept, but the doubly boosted shell flew quickly, successfully penetrating the final defense and accurately landing on the airport runway. Wait until I take off. Wait until I take off. Then see how I bomb you to death. Koizumi Keiji clenched his teeth tightly. He had already received a message from the tower that the enemy was only dozens of kilometers away, a distance he could reach instantly in his fighter jet. As one of Japan's most outstanding pilots, Koizumi Keiji had risen to the rank of elite pilot at a young age and was decorated with a lieutenant colonel's commission. He was confident he could take care of it, as he was piloting one of the most advanced fighters on the planet, the F-35. Runway condition, fighter condition good, taking off immediately. The ground marshal waved the flags and shouted, and Koizumi Keiji was ecstatic as he pulled the throttle. The preheated fighter jet accelerated on the runway, ready to glide and take off. Just then, unexpectedly, the dread-inducing sound of a long train horn was heard, and soon Koizumi Keiji saw a dark shadow descending. It's over. The thought barely crossed his mind when the explosion erupted like a volcanic eruption, shaking the earth. The massive shell, weighing several tons, smashed the jets trying to take off into a sprawl of debris. Koizumi Keiji was right at the center of the explosion. His body instantly reduced to shreds, and the F-35 he was seated in, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was also torn apart and disintegrated. Xiao Qian, nicely done. Su Jia patted the head of the thousand-handed centipede, looking at the super-huge crater in the cement runway caused by the explosion that turned several awaiting jets, F-16s, F-35s among them, into a pile of scrap metal. But just one missile was not enough to completely resolve the issue, as a military airport has far more than just one runway. Besides the regular concrete runways, there were also dirt and grass airstrips. Since runways are an important target for enemy airstrikes and time-consuming to repair once damaged, the airport was constructed with additional dirt airstrips to ensure that airplanes could continue taking off. Even if a dirt airstrip was hit by enemy fire, it could be easily repaired and adapted to wartime requirements. The thousand-handed centipede, chirping joyfully, cooperated with Su Jie in continuing the assault, firing over a dozen colossal shells in succession, obliterating several concrete and dirt runways. By then, the airport had plunged into complete chaos, with the colossal shells possessing extremely terrifying destructive power. Where they fell, it was almost impossible for anyone within a radius of 150 meters to survive. Not only did these artillery rounds destroy the runways, but they also pockmarked the refueling apron, parking apron, taxiways, calibration ranges, and pilot barracks, completely blocking any possibility of emergency takeoffs or landings for the fighter jets. Being unable to take off didn't mean the threat was eliminated. Su Jie's attack had already alarmed the entire military of Chan country. Fighter jets from other military airfields were urgently taking off, or transferring via civilian airports, to rush to the aid of Chan country's largest military airport. Su Jie looked up and saw, in the distance, several missiles screaming through the sky towards him. These missiles were fired from the west, likely launched from sea-based warship platforms. Xiao Qian, let's move. Let's find another spot to fire from. Su Jie took the thousand-handed centipede back underground and packed up the portable array map. Not long after they left, several missiles hit the area, causing everything to fly around like charred earth, breaking trees and leaving a total mess. The shelling has stopped. We have destroyed the enemy's attack position. Inside the Putuo Airport control room, the Air Force commander Wen Kai was overjoyed, his face filled with the relief of having survived a calamity. Damn it, immediately dispatch ground forces. Use helicopters to search the area. We might capture some survivors and bring them in for questioning, yelled Jing Shangyan, the commander of Japan's aviation mixed group. During the recent barrage of attacks, more than a dozen Japanese fighters were destroyed, with many elite pilots and ground crew killed or injured. This significant loss made him crack under pressure. He wanted to capture the culprits responsible for this disaster as soon as possible. We've already sent people there. Thankfully, our missiles were powerful and prevented them from reaching the airplanes sheltered in the hangar bunkers. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to explain to the president. When Kai took a deep breath, though the airport had lost over 30 fighters, many more were preserved, and the destroyed airfield could be quickly repaired to maintain a formidable fighting force. I've just received news that it's Jekka Group that's attacking us. At Wu River Base and Xavier Airport, Jekka Group has launched surprise attacks on us. The attackers here at the airport must also be from the Jekka Group, aiming to prevent us from flying in reinforcements to those two battlefields. When Lai reported with the latest intelligence from headquarters, finally identifying the attackers. What? They dare to start a war? They dare attack the military bases of our great Japan. I'll never forgive those beasts of Jekka Group. Jing Shangyan exploded in rage, still in the dark about the situation at Wu River Base. It would be a difficult situation to explain domestically if the losses were too heavy. First, let's repair part of the dirt airstrip to allow for emergency takeoffs and landings. Mobilize the planes from the bunkers. We need to support the other battles, decided Wen Lai. It was risky to take off from a dirt runway, but given the grim circumstances, there was no time for caution. Air support was needed for the other battlefields. What Wen Lai felt most grateful for now was that the enemy had been eliminated quickly. Otherwise, if they had damaged those hangar bunkers, things would have been truly disastrous. However, almost as soon as Wen Lai had finished speaking, the familiar sound of a train horn once again pierced the night sky. Wen Lai and Jing Shangyan's faces changed dramatically as they saw a dark shadow streak across the sky, landing near the airport's control tower. The enemy is still alive? Where did this shelling come from? Jing Shangyan and Wen Kai were shocked to see the shell fall, destroying the control tower, and they were utterly dumbfounded. A few kilometers away, Su Jie emerged again with the thousand-handed centipede, set up the camouflage array map, and positioned the Shao Qian train gun to stand upright. This spot is pretty good for shelling, remarked Su Jie as he dusted himself off. He had not left so easily after all. The previous assault had only targeted the planes parked in the open. This was not a wartime makeshift airfield. Putuo Airport, as a permanently established airport, naturally took into account the possibility of missile strikes and air raids. The majority of the fighter jets were stored in various cunning hangar bunkers, with only a few outside. Su Jie needed to destroy the formidable air superiority of Chan country and Japan to aid the upcoming ground operations. It wouldn't do just to bomb a few exposed planes. Shao Qian this time switched to armor-piercing bullets. "We're striking at the enemy's core," ordered Su Jie. Su Jie took out an armor-piercing bullet, replacing the previously used high-explosive bomb, and loaded it into the fleshy cannon. Once ready, the massive shell whizzed out, dropping into the cut-and-cover aircraft cave a couple of kilometers from the runway. Although the cave entrance was well concealed, it could not fool the scrutiny of reconnaissance insects. The rapidly descending giant armor-piercing shell head, made of ultra-high hardness alloys, struck the aircraft cave with high precision, where there was a door protruding outwards, weighing dozens of tons. This door could withstand the impact of ordinary missiles, but it was no match for the giant armor-piercing shell. Upon contact with the steel door, the shell head turned the point of impact into molten steel, brutally penetrating through. Inside was a hangar housing 20 warplanes, with some work and rest rooms on both sides. Within the cave entrance, there was a towpath connected to the runway, paved smoothly and straight, where the internal warplanes were in the midst of emergency dispatch, fueling and arming, preparing for takeoff, capable of launching swiftly into combat once they glided out the entrance. But just then, the logistics personnel and pilots stationed there heard a thunderous explosion overhead, while the lights shook violently. The next moment, a gigantic shell plummeted in, rolling and crushing countless bodies and warplanes along its path. The soldiers inside the hangar stared blankly, their bodies trembling, witnessing the red glowing shell, filled with panic and desperately trying to escape. But barely 7 or 8 seconds later, the delayed fuse of the armor-piercing bullet was triggered, and the entire shell exploded with a roar, engulfing all the soldiers and warplanes inside in flames that burst forth from the entrance. No sooner had the hangar been destroyed than a second armor-piercing shell fell at high speed, burying itself into the front half of a runway. Below this concrete runway was a large underground tunnel, hidden like a subway. It had lifts specifically for airplanes to ascend and descend between underground and above ground, operating on a principle similar to that of an aircraft carrier which moves its planes from the hangar to the deck using an elevator. But in their concealed defense, they never considered how to defend against insect reconnaissance. Nor did they imagine that someone would attack with giant armor-piercing shells. As the shell smashed in, the soldiers at the airport could only clutch their heads and weep in despair, watching helplessly as the ground was blown away, with warplanes stored underground destroyed utterly. Then several more armor-piercing shells fell, destroying one protective hangar after another, blowing up all the warplanes parked inside. But this was not the end. Su Jie, with the thousand-hand centipede, moved their position again, re-emerging a kilometer away. This time, Su Jie's target shifted again. This time, Su Jie aimed at the fuel storage in the airport. Modern jet aircraft consume a lot of fuel. A single warplane could easily be fueled with 2 to 3 tons, so the capacity of the airport's fuel depot was substantial. This Putuo Airport was Chan Country's largest military airport, with the fuel storage inside holding over 10,000 tons of fuel. Apart from a small amount of fuel at the ground refueling apron, most of the airport's fuel was stored in a depot inside the mountain caves. The depot was divided into large fuel tanks with fire doors at intervals to contain any fire outbreak. In case of a fire, these doors could seal off to prevent the spread to other tanks. Su Jie fired several shells in succession, completely detonating the oil depot housing tens of thousands of tons, just as with the previous assault on the aircraft hangar, where continuous bombardment overwhelmed any fire protective measures. Eventually, the oil depot exploded, with flames and rolling smoke blanketing the sky above the airport. Many soldiers were burnt to death outright. The airport resembled a disaster scene with lava flowing everywhere post-volcanic eruption, many engulfed and ignited by the fierce flames. The high temperatures scorched everything nearby, while the fire, like a fierce devil, devoured life after life. Su Jie then struck the oxygen plant, the air conditioning units and charging stations among other critical facilities, and finally, Su Jie aimed at the ammunition depot within the airport. The final blow will pack up after this. Guessing that fighter jets from other locations were on their way to provide support, Su Jie decided to make it quick. Into the barrel of the Eternal Spear, they stuffed a specially designed ultra-heavy armor-piercing shell weighing over 10 tons, the biggest shell of all. As the shell entered the barrel, the spirit stones embedded on its surface flickered, continuously providing energy. Meanwhile, Su Jie released the purple cloud heavenly thunder to its maximum, granting the shells greater initial velocity as they left the barrel. Boom! In the enormous rumbling of thunder, the thousand-handed centipede was pushed back several steps by the recoil. The heavy, high-speed armor-piercing bullets frictions with the air, emitting a terrifying, piercing scream that sounded like an eternal spear thrown by a god, piercing through everything. In less than a minute, the giant armor-piercing bullet burrowed into the underground ammunition depot located 30 meters beneath Putuo Airport, protected by 5 meters of thick concrete and 1 meter of armored steel plate. To maintain the high sortie rate of the large aircraft fleet, a massive amount of ammunition was stored here, necessitating such strong defenses that even heavy bunker-busting ordnance might not penetrate it. But the giant armor-piercing bullet did just that. Propelled by tremendous thrust, it entered the earth at a perfect angle, drilled through dozens of meters of soil, as well as the thick concrete and steel armor, dissolving Putuo Airport's strongest fortress defenses, successfully striking its target and bringing death and destruction to the entire Putuo Airport. Boom! The explosion of the ammunition depot was shockingly beautiful. The ground heaved upwards rapidly, with hot waves surging from below. Accompanied by the earth-shattering blast, rolling smoke rose like a massive sandstorm, and crimson flames bloomed seductively, resembling gorgeous and vibrant flowers from the other side, vying for brilliance. The explosive light, carrying massive waves of air, spread rapidly in all directions, the scorching airflow picking up dust and debris. The air raid siren wailed miserably, as the relentless sounds of explosions filled the ears, and buildings collapsed in succession, with shattered steel and concrete falling like meteor showers, mercilessly pounding on the fleeing soldiers. Screams and cries echoed across the entire airport, as fear surged over the hearts of each soldier like a tidal wave. The entire airport, with the ammunition depot at its center, saw all buildings within a kilometer radius collapse, and the soldiers nearby were blown apart, with not a single intact body part to be found. The power of countless tons of ammunition exploding simultaneously was chilling, and even residents dozens of kilometers away could see the massive explosion and its bright flames, hastily capturing it on their mobile phones. TSK caliber is justice. That shot was so satisfying. Let's go, Shao Qian. Watching the spectacular scene of the ammunition depot's detonation, Su Jie nodded in satisfaction. Before the enemy's warplanes arrived, he and the thousand-handed centipede burrowed back underground, quietly leaving the area. Although Su Jie had left, the nightmare he brought did not disappear. As more and more support and rescue forces arrived at Putuo Airport, they were stunned by the horrific scene before them. The airport now resembled hell, with twisted parts of destroyed fighter jets everywhere. Large swathes of buildings lay in ruins, with terrifying bomb craters scattered throughout the airport ground, and burning fires and billowing smoke everywhere. The soldiers and crew stationed at the airport suffered unimaginable casualties, with cries of agony and the groans of those severely wounded and maimed echoing everywhere. It's over. We're finished. When Kai knelt on the ground, painfully witnessing the devastation of Putuo Airport. This airport had gathered the majority of Chan country's fighter jets, and now nearly 100 of them were destroyed. Could be said that after this battle, Chan country's air combat capabilities were almost completely decimated, setting them back to the pre-liberation era overnight. We must seek revenge. I will report to His Majesty the Emperor. We must have our revenge. Jing Shangyan's face was ashen, his eyes somewhat dazed and unfocused as he stared at it all. The aviation mixed group from Japan Station here, with its 204th and 304th squadrons, including 40 F-15 fighter jets, 2 E-2C early warning aircraft, and 4 F-35 fighter jets, was left with nothing. Along with the deaths and heavy injuries of many pilots and ground staff, the loss amounted to $6 or $7 billion, driving him to the brink of agony, his hatred for the JECA group peaking at that moment. Japan. In the capital Tokyo, merely a few meters from the National Congress Hall, lies the Prime Minister's residence. Tsuneshima Shuchi flipped through the documents and said to the Secretary General beside him, "Is the crowd still causing a stir at the Tokyo Electric Power Company in the Chiyoda district?" The Secretary General nodded, replying, "Yes, Tokyo Electric Power Company plans to hold a press conference today. As long as they bow and admit their mistake, the matter will mostly blow over. Let Tokyo Electric Power Company quiet down for a while. Give them a call and tell them to promise at the press conference to temporarily suspend the fifth ocean discharge until the heat dies down. Then resume." Tsuneshima Shuchi adjusted his glasses and gave new orders calmly. The Secretary General was about to go out and relay the message when he opened the door to see someone running towards him in a hasty and disheveled state, hair all tousled. He was about to scold the person but paused in surprise as soon as he recognized the visitor. Because the person who had come running was none other than Inoue Fumihiro, the Defense Minister of Japan's National Defense Department. The Defense Minister was in charge of national defense affairs across the country, responsible for proposing defense-related bills and budget plans. He also oversaw the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chiefs of Staff of the Ground, Maritime and Air Self-Defense Forces, supervising the troops and agencies of the Japan Self-Defense Force. He had the authority to mobilize any division of Japan's intelligence headquarters. His power was immense, and with the Emperor's power practically non-existent today, his status was second only to the Prime Minister. Such an influential military official was seldom seen except during important meetings, and it was unclear why he had rushed to the Prime Minister's residence in such a hurry today. The Defense Minister Inoue Fumihiro didn't even glance at the Secretary General and barged straight into the Prime Minister's office. Hearing the commotion, Prime Minister Tsuneshima Shuchi was puzzled and asked, "Inoue, what brings you here so early in the morning? Is there some issue?" Then, seeing the frosty expression on Inoue Fumihiro's face, he immediately sensed that something was amiss, that there must be some emergency. Inoue Fumihiro, gasping for breath and with a heavy heart, said, "Prime Minister, at dawn today, JECA Group used the pretext of an exercise to secretly mobilize an airstrike team and super soldiers, launching wars on Chan Country and our forces in Japan. They attacked Wuha Military Camp, Xavier Airport, and Putuo Airport in succession, causing extremely heavy casualties. The entire fleet of the aviation mixed group has been destroyed, and 519 pilots, ground crew, and maintenance technicians died or were injured, with 220 missing. As for the self-defense team stationed at Wuha Military Camp, we're still tallying the dead and injured, but we've already confirmed 1,322 deaths and around 1,000 injuries. Many armored units have been destroyed, and several high-ranking officers have been captured. At the same time, Chan Country has suffered equally grievous losses. The aircraft stationed at Xavier Airport and Putuo Airport were largely destroyed as units, and now Chan Country has less than 10 operational fighter jets. We have lost air superiority over Chan Country's skies in the immediate future." Upon hearing this dire news, Tsuneshima Shuchi's hand, clutching a pen, trembled, and his eyes widened in disbelief. "What did you say? Repeat that to me." "Prime Minister, this is the detailed battle report just sent over from Chan Country's command center." Inoue Fumihiro, with a pained expression, understood the Prime Minister's state of mind. He had felt as if struck by lightning when he first heard the bad news. Tsuneshima Shuchi's hands stiffened as he took the battle report and read through it thoroughly, his complexion darkening and his eyes filled with rage and frustration. When he finally set down the report, Tsuneshima Shuchi could no longer contain his fury and stood up, knocking over a tea cup with a slap of his hand. "Damn it all! A bunch of incompetence! How could you manage to fight such a disgraceful battle? Is this how you repay the expectations of the Emperor and over 100 million nationals?" Tsuneshima Shuchi had every reason to be angry. They had sent self-defense force soldiers to Chan Country hoping to fight a splendid battle, not to be routed disgracefully. This war had barely begun, and of the 8,000 soldiers sent to Chan Country, all aircraft were destroyed, with nearly 2,000 dead and countless more injured. It could be said that the aviation mixed group and the 13th Brigade were basically annihilated, leaving only the 1st Airborne Regiment intact. The situation was nothing short of a disaster. We did not anticipate that JECA Group would truly declare war. They completed troop mobilizations under the guise of an exercise. Combined with the nighttime operations, the helicopter assault team made a low-altitude breakthrough and initiated the attack at dawn, catching our soldiers completely off guard. "Most were still in their dreams when they were hit unexpectedly," said Inoue Fumihiro dryly, pointing to the report and slowly explaining, "As for Putuo Airport, we suspect the enemy used tunnels to transport, bringing in some kind of super-heavy artillery to bomb the airport, resulting in the destruction of key facilities such as hangars, fuel depots, and ammunition depots. I don't care about the reasons. In this war, I'm only asking about the balance of power. Don't we, Japan and Chan Country combined, have the upper hand? Even if the enemy caught us by surprise, the battle shouldn't have gone this badly. How do I explain this to all the nationals?" Tsuneshima Shuchi demanded fiercely. Although he was not very knowledgeable about military matters, he knew that on Chan Country soil, his side had an absolute advantage. How could he accept such an outcome on the very first day of the war? "Tell me, is our annual domestic military budget not hefty enough? Last year we spent $51 billion on military expenses to support hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the Navy, Army, and Air Force. In Asia, aside from that large eastern country, who else spends more on their military than us? And yet the soldiers we have fostered with so much military spending have been beaten into disarray by a small-time warlord from Chan Country. How can I believe that your self-defense army isn't derelict in duty, isn't wasting the tax money of all taxpayers? Spittle sprayed onto Inoue Fumihiro's face as Tsuneshima Shuchi became apoplectic with rage. We were supposed to strike a blow that showcased the might of Japan, but instead, at the very start, we've crumbled to this extent. Forget about demonstrating our military prowess. Others will only see the Japan Self-Defense Force as a noodle army, going limp as soon as it's hit. Hey, I'm really sorry. Inoue Fumihiro had nothing to say, and could only hang his head in shame, although he wanted to explain that the enemy wasn't just some small-time warlord, but a tough character who had once defeated his own masters and even commanded super soldiers that the beautiful country didn't possess a force beyond ordinary comprehension. But a defeat was a defeat, and no amount of explanation could erase Tsuneshima Shuchi's anger. He simply had to accept the scolding in silence. Tsuneshima Shuchi ranted at Inoue Fumihiro for a full 10 minutes, only stopping when he himself was out of breath. "Prime Minister, please calm down." The Secretary-General hurriedly administered some blood pressure medicine to the Prime Minister and patted his back to help him catch his breath. "What's the current situation on Chan country's side?" Tsuneshima Shuchi had had his fill of yelling and finally began to discuss serious matters. After confirming that the Jekka group had declared war on us, the Chan country government immediately heightened military alertness and called up more troops to Jibong Jinlao Mountain, deciding to launch an offensive against the Jekka group tomorrow morning. Inoue Fumihiro quickly relayed the information, highlighting his own predicament and embarrassment. "Prime Minister, the Chan country government is urgently requesting our assistance for combat. According to the Mutual Defense Pact we signed with Chan country previously, we are indeed obligated to send troops. But the current situation is that our local forces have been severely hit, our aircraft entirely destroyed. We can't assist them at all. Now we have only two choices. Either withdraw our troops and no longer participate in this military conflict, or send reinforcements from within our country to aid Chan country." Withdraw the troops? No, that's not an option. If we withdraw now, our losses will indeed be real, and the promises made by the beautiful country would likely be indefinitely postponed. Without a second thought, Tsuneshima Shuchi immediately dismissed the suggestion. The reason Japan was so actively involved in Chan country's affairs was because the beautiful country made promises prior to the conflict. If the Jekka group was defeated, they would ease the pressure on the Japan Self-Defense Force, allow changes to the security laws, and break through the ultimate bottom line, allowing Japan to become a regular country again and upgrade the Japan Self-Defense Force to a self-defense army. Although it was still uncertain whether these were empty promises by the beautiful country, Japan had already committed itself to the situation in Chan country, suffering a lot of loss both materially and in pride. If they were to withdraw now in disgrace, the beautiful country's promises would certainly be void, and Japan would become a global laughingstock. Japan itself is a nation prone to taking gambles, particularly fond of staking its national destiny in the past century. The country gambled correctly twice before, but on the third occasion it lost, forfeiting not only what it had previously won but also the principal investment. But Japan never thought it was because of their own shortcomings. Facing the gamble once again, they succumbed to the old gambler's mentality. At this moment, Japan was like a gambler. There's a term called sunk cost fallacy. The more they lost in Chan country, the more they wanted to push more chips onto the table. Because only by persevering and ultimately winning the war could they win everything back at once. So, are we going to reinforce our troops? Inoue Fumihiro felt a glimmer of surprise. Of course, he did not want to pull the Chan country garrison back home with his tail between his legs. If he did that, after suffering such a significant defeat, his position as defense minister would be all but over, surely followed by dismissal. Only by continuing to send reinforcements to Chan country did he have a chance to turn the tables, win the war, and secure his position. Redraft a proposal for sending additional reinforcements. I need it to discuss terms with the beautiful country. Tsuneshima Shuchi fell silent for half a minute, then eventually opted for reinforcement. His expression stone-faced as he stared at Inoue Fumihiro and said coldly, "This time, if you lose again, prepare to be dismissed. Prime Minister, we will win. Please trust me. Trust the 350,000 brave and fearless soldiers of the Self-Defense Force." Inoue Fumihiro quickly assured, ready to commit wholeheartedly to defeating the Jekka group, even if only for his own sake. Chan Country, the border between Ji State and East Chin State. A river runs through the two provinces, the Baoji River, which carves out fertile land on both banks and also serves as the dividing line between the two provinces. The terrain of Ji State is mostly flat. It is one of the few plain areas within Chan Country, a basin plain surrounded by high mountains. The industry here is relatively developed. Besides the abundant mineral resources, this is also inseparable from the region's topography. Most of Chan Country's territory is crisscrossed with mountains and jungles, making it difficult to transport resources out, and constructing infrastructure in the dense forests and mountains is beyond the country's capabilities. At this moment, as the sun had just risen not long ago, many early rising farmers in Ji State, near the Baoji River, carrying hoes and other farm tools, rolling up their trouser legs to head to the fields, heard a strange rumbling sound. In the distance, they could see black smoke trailing in the sky, extending towards them. Just as these farmers were puzzling over it, they arrived at the banks of the Baoji River and witnessed a sight they had only seen on television: the Steel Tide. An iron bridge, hastily constructed overnight by the Engineer Corps, spanned the Baoji River. Countless tanks, armored vehicles, self-propelled howitzers, rocket artillery, self-propelled air defense missile vehicles, high-altitude artillery, infantry carriers, and trucks were lining up to cross it. Brigade Commander, a tank has broken down on the bridge. We're working on repairs. Inside a command vehicle, Valenkin frowned as he received the report. He stepped out of the vehicle, picked up a pair of binoculars, and indeed saw a tank that had, inconveniently, broken down on the bridge, blocking the way. He did not hesitate, giving a direct order: keep the troops orderly. Don't bother repairing the broken-down tank. Have the armored vehicles on both sides work together and push it into the river. We must reach the attack position on time. He did not spare a thought for the multimillion-dollar main battle tank's loss, only desiring to cross the bridge as quickly as possible. After issuing this command, Valenkin returned to studying the map, estimating the speed of the crossing. Crossing the river should take about an hour, and then a full-speed assault for another 2 hours should bring them to the first defensive position. I hope everything goes smoothly. Valenkin watched the brightening sky with some unease. Such a large-scale movement of armored troops, without having established air supremacy, would be extremely dangerous. As a person from Bear Country, after his retirement, he was employed by the Jekka group. At first, he only served as a military instructor. However, his diligence earned the Jekka group's trust. After bringing his family to Mande City, he was honored to become the brigade commander of the Jekka group's only heavy combined brigade, commanding this armor onslaught on lightning strike missions. Valenkin was an officer in an armored unit back in Bear Country, and after retiring due to certain incidents and his parents' severe illness, he was forced to leave the army and sought livelihood with the Jekka group. It was unexpected that the Jekka group, urgently requiring high-level military personnel, would treat him well. He cherished this hard-earned opportunity and did not want the heavy combined brigade to suffer serious losses. In fact, when he received this military mission, Valenkin was quite resistant. In modern warfare, air supremacy reigns supreme, and the enemy could launch fighter jets and ground attack planes for a strike at any moment. Even with air defense missiles and high-altitude artillery, ground armored troops would struggle against a large number of fighter jets. The enemy only needed to eliminate the air defense armored units with air-to-ground missiles, and the remaining armored troops would be sitting ducks for the aircraft overhead, a tempting snack. However, his opposition was not acknowledged. His superiors merely hinted at solving the enemy's air supremacy issue, but how it would be resolved was not something within his knowledge. Even now, he was unsure whether the assurances from above were true or false. Should the enemy's air supremacy remain, the heavy combined brigade would undoubtedly suffer heavy damage. Brigade Commander, urgent telegram from headquarters. Suddenly, a signalman ran over in a hurry, holding a stack of telegrams, his face beaming with great joy. Valenkin grabbed the telegrams and, after reading them, his previously furrowed brow gradually relaxed until he couldn't contain himself and burst into hearty laughter. Ha ha ha, excellent. We have one for sure now. Valenkin excitedly punched the air. The telegram stated that the airstrike group's 3 attacks launched in the early hours of the morning had been a complete success. The enemy's air combat jets, which he had been most worried about, were mostly destroyed on the ground. Now his armored troops could advance unobstructed. Full speed ahead. Today I will stay overnight in Jiwei City, Ji State's largest city. Tell the lads below to put their backs into it. Valenkin's excitement was palpable. Without the threat of airstrikes, the armored troops' advantage would become limitless. Jekka Security 1st Brigade continued crossing the river, under the watchful eyes of some curious farmers by the roadside, completing the river crossing in less than an hour. Then, the whole unit turned south and headed straight for the nearest Chan Country Army camp. 2 hours later, a Chan Country Army camp, where 1,000 soldiers were stationed, saw fire rain from the sky. Rockets streaked with beautiful trails, dropping haphazardly around the camp, blasts turning the earth to scorched rubble, with human limbs scattered everywhere. Boom, 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 boom. Following that, shells from 152mm caliber artillery fell, blasting the soldiers in the barracks into dizziness and confusion. Caught in a state of panic, they had no thoughts of preparing a defense. Many of these Chan Country soldiers were newly recruited and had never faced such a battle with gunfire flying and shells raining down indiscriminately. Those who could still hold onto their guns without ducking were considered good enough. Many of the new recruits were so frightened they wet their pants, crying and lying on the ground, not daring to even peek their heads out. Even those so-called veterans from the Chan Country, who were more accustomed to dealing with guerrillas in the mountains and forests, had never encountered such a fierce and concentrated artillery barrage. Neither their government army nor the warlords had ever operated like this. It's as if they thought artillery shells and fuel didn't cost money. Most of the armored vehicles they had purchased were kept in storage. These gas guzzlers rarely had the chance to see action. Is anyone still alive? Make a sound. I'm scared. When the shelling stopped, a new recruit in a dugout bomb shelter started shouting tremulously. He couldn't hear any noise outside, and the silence led him to fear that all his comrades had died. Hey, is there still anyone alive? Before the recruit could finish speaking, he saw a veteran crawl in, reach out his hand, and drag him out to the cover behind the dugout. The veteran was furiously yelling, but the recruit could hear nothing. It was not until then that he realized he had lost his hearing from the artillery shock. The recruit vigorously rubbed his ears, terrified that he might truly have gone deaf. Fortunately, his hearing loss was only temporary. Gradually, he began to hear the chaotic noise from outside, the cries and the shouting. My leg is gone. Has anyone seen my leg? Where is the enemy? Where exactly is the enemy? Medic, we need a medic over here. My brother's belly has been hit by shrapnel. I can barely hold in his intestines. The recruit, shivering, listened to the chaotic noise of the battlefield when suddenly, he felt the ground trembling slightly beneath him. Then, the sound of mechanical rumbling grew closer. The recruit poked his head out of the trench and saw an endless number of tanks and armored vehicles appearing on the horizon of the plains, rolling like a steel flood shaking the earth, with black smoke blotting out the sky. Seeing this sight for the first time, the recruit's mouth hung open as fear made his whole body tremble. It wasn't just the recruits who were afraid. All the soldiers in the barracks were terrified. They were just a bunch of infantrymen, and on this plain terrain, how could they stop the advancing steel flood? The few resistances they had attempted to put up by firing a few shots. As a result, after tanks blasted them sky-high, the remaining soldiers, one after another, sensibly raised white flags and walked out of their shelters to surrender. The steel flood hardly paused. After leaving a small number of infantry to take over the prisoners, the remaining forces continued to advance. At this moment, the headquarters of the Chan Country had already received intelligence about this heavy mechanized brigade and immediately issued orders to set up multiple layers of defenses. But the military officials of the Chan Country had overestimated the mobilization speed of their troops. On the plains, how could human legs outrun an armored force? Before the Chan Country troops could reach the blocking positions, the heavy mechanized brigade had already breached the defensive line. Even for the units that managed to catch up and attempt to block, on the plains facing the assault of armored forces, they had no option but to dig trenches and set up defenses with drones, artillery, rocket launchers, and anti-tank missiles. However, compared to the vast steel flood, such defenses were too easily broken through. With armed helicopters in the sky and tanks and armored vehicles on the ground, the infantry also coordinated their efforts, especially those second-class and third-class super soldiers assigned to the units, each nearly a sharpshooter. The soldiers trying to ambush with rocket launchers often got sniped in the head by super soldiers before they even had a chance to aim properly. Many infantrymen didn't even have time to dig trenches before encountering the steel flood on the open plain, getting shattered on impact, and having their defense lines broken through layer by layer. Lacking air superiority, the heavy mechanized brigade charged forward unhindered, advancing at a lightning-fast pace and tearing through the defensive lines laid out by the Chan Country Army within G State. After crossing Baoji River, they swiftly moved ahead, reaching Jiwei City, the capital of G State, by sunset. Meanwhile, a sizable elite force of 50,000 from the Chan Country Army was mostly deployed in Jibong Jinlao Mountain, facing off against the East Chin State border, where they had built numerous defenses. In the basin plains surrounded by forests and mountains of G State, Jiwei City was their logistical backbone. Now that it had been blocked by the Jekka Group's heavy mechanized brigade, the 50,000 Chan Country troops at the border were immediately at a loss. If they failed to break through Jiwei City, they faced the prospect of running out of water and food. Without logistics for ammunition and supplies, this large contingent of troops could only become isolated. As history has shown, no strategy is more devastating than cutting off provisions. When the news of Jiwei City being captured spread, the entire Chan Country government was stunned. With their retreat cut off, the 50,000 troops left in G State had become sitting ducks, causing great anxiety throughout Chan Country. Upon hearing this news, the current president of Chan Country promptly delivered a nationwide television address. A despicable sneak attack. The Jekka Group, ignoring international morality, launched a dawn raid on our troops and our Japanese allies today, committing heinous crimes at Wuha Military Camp, Xavier Airport, and Putuo Airport, and now they have taken control of our Jiwei City, plunging our unprepared military and civilians into war. This is a shameful crime, and the Jekka Group and its puppet master, Su Jie, a new Nazi element, is spreading the flowers of evil on the soil of Southeast Asia. In the face of this catastrophic invasion, Chan Country is now shrouded in darkness, and the Jekka Group is attempting to erase anything that does not comply with their objectives. But ladies and gentlemen, the people of Chan Country will not give up, nor will we allow the continuation of this evil war. Ultimately, the victors will surely be us, the righteous. Now, in the name of the highest commander of Chan Country, I mobilize the entire military to respond to the shameless invasion of the Jekka Group. At the same time, we will call on all allies to stand with us on a united front, to fight against the evil Jekka Group, until complete victory is achieved. After Chan Country delivered its war speech, other member states of the Eight-Nation Group also spoke out in quick succession. Beautiful country. We strongly condemn the vile act of Jekka Group's instigation of war, and my beautiful country will not stand by as this new Nazism and extreme radical organization spreads in the southeast region, bringing terror and destruction to the world. We have decided to formally initiate an aid proposal, providing the first installment of $5 billion in military aid to help the Chan Country government cope with the threat of the Jekka Group, to curb the emergence and spread of this evil force, and to resist this unjust military aggression. Japan. A shameless military sneak attack, the Jekka Group used the exclusive maneuvers to attack our troops stationed in Chan Country. Now, my country declares that Japan will, in accordance with the Mutual Defense Treaty signed with Chan Country, dispatch new self-defense Team 9th Division, 7th Division, and Aviation Mixed Group, totaling 22,000 soldiers into Chan Country to help expel and defeat the evil Jekka Group. Temasek, Luzon, Siam, Jawa, Johor, members of the Eight-Nation Group, openly stated, "We reiterate that we will not send troops into Chan Country to intervene in the civil war. But bound by the security agreement of the Eight-Nation Group, we will initiate the lease legislation, aid programs including helmets, firearms, grenade launchers, tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, drones, and a range of supplies and financial support to provide all corresponding logistics and armament safeguards for the Chan country government. After the Eight-Nation Group voiced their stance, the JECA Group responded at the same time. Su Jie also held a press conference, expressing with regret, "Regarding the war that broke out today, all the blame is not on us. The Eight-Nation Group left us no choice, militarily cornering our JECA Group, constantly creating security threats with fighter plane provocations and random shelling, and even capturing our soldiers during exercises. This is Chan country in collusion with what they call the Eight-Nation Group, wanting to impose power and violence upon the JECA Group. The Chan country government, in order to grovel before beautiful country in Japan, is willing to act as their lackey, blindly instigated to become a puppet state. For the safety of the lives and property of all our employees, the JECA Group had no choice but to take up arms for self-defense, forced to initiate special military actions. Here I want to say, no matter how advanced the enemy's weapons are, no matter how large the number of soldiers, our JECA Group will achieve a perfect victory in this war. Because, standing behind us are 3 million civilians who support us, brave warriors who are unwilling to accept any more exploitation from the Chan country government and have risen in righteous indignation. Therefore, the final victor of this war will only be the JECA Group. Our JECA Group will make every effort to liberate the masses oppressed by the Chan country government." As soon as Su Jie finished speaking, a large number of reporters quickly raised their hands. "Mr. Su, the Eight-Nation Group has announced their intent to provide the greatest scale of aid to the Chan country government. The continuation of the war will only cause widespread carnage in Chan country. Is there any possibility of a ceasefire negotiation to peacefully resolve the conflict?" A Chinese reporter stood up and asked this question. Su Jie shook his head and said, "Today, all our combat missions have been perfectly completed, and the balance of the war victory is tilting in our favor. No matter how much financial aid the Eight-Nation Group provides, it will not shake the pace of our military operations. To tell you the truth, we do not wish to initiate war. But if war is forced upon us, we will not shy away from it. If the Eight-Nation Group is sincere, they can first let the soldiers in G-State lay down their weapons. Then we will consider accepting the ceasefire negotiations. Mr. Su, due to your attack on our Chan country garrison, the Prime Minister has officially issued a new troops reinforcement resolution. Soon, more than 20,000 soldiers will land on the Chan country battlefield. Do you regret provoking our Japan?" A Japanese reporter stood up, holding a microphone and looking angrily at Su Jie. Upon hearing this, Su Jie let out a scornful laugh and said indifferently, "Japan, are you referring to the 13th Brigade that we decimated, and the aviation mixed group that had all its warplanes destroyed? If Japanese soldiers dare to set foot on this land, I will kill one for every one that comes, and a pair for every pair that comes." As he spoke, Su Jie gestured for Liu Yingying to show the JECA Group's achievements. Several high-ranking Japanese officers captured were brought in, the 13th Brigade's flag was trampled and burned, various images of the deathly conditions of Japanese soldiers, and high-resolution photos of destroyed warplanes were displayed, causing the Japanese reporters present at the press conference to look extremely uncomfortable, just like they had eaten dead rats. Oh! The next day, on October 18th, on the second day of the war, news of the civil war in Chan country exploded across all media, bombarding everyone's eyesight. All major news and military-related media were urgently broadcasting this major event. JECA Group brazenly invades Chan country government territory, instigating civil war and creating a humanitarian disaster. Global Times. The military invasion triggered by the conspiracy of soldiers' disappearance during exercises, JECA Group's brutality and ferocity are deeply concerning. Washington Post. Japan announces it will militarily intervene in the Chan country situation and impose unprecedented sanctions on the JECA Group to eliminate the terrorist organization entrenched in Chan country. Sahi News. In-depth interpretation of the Chan country war situation reveals the West's hype of the situation, with hidden agendas. Hua Xian International Telecommunications. Insiders reveal that on the first day of the war, Chan country and Japan suffered heavy losses, losing air superiority, with multiple military bases destroyed. The Jekka Group's heavy composite brigade advanced into Jiwei City and surrounded 50,000 soldiers of the Chan Country Government Army. Mao Bear Truth Newspaper. A new type of biochemical soldier. The Jekka Group is conducting dangerous biochemical research, an act that could bring catastrophic harm to the whole world. New York Times. The barrage of news only belatedly made the public realize that the Jekka Group had indeed gone to war, and they were the ones who initiated the conflict. This move shocked many people. Many military experts, who had confidently claimed before the war that the Jekka Group was merely feigning strength and would never dare to start a war, had their faces figuratively swollen. Related to these news items, many videos from the day the war broke out also simultaneously leaked onto social media platforms. Some were released by the Jekka Group itself and some by Chan Country and Japan. Of course, most of them were released by the Jekka Group. Losers do not want their disgrace seen by the world. These videos were shot not only by embedded journalists but also from the first-person perspective of soldiers' action cameras. The most explosive video was of first-class super soldiers wearing heavy battle armor, boarding helicopters for low-altitude penetration attacks into enemy camps and airports. The video clearly showed the terrifying nature of the first-class super soldiers, their alloy battle armor impervious to regular gunfire and their physical abilities far beyond human limits. They wielded various heavy weaponry and rampaged through the camps, slaughtering indiscriminately. Although many parts were blurred out, the gruesome scene was evident, with hardly a single body left intact. The emergence of these individual powered suits and super soldiers led netizens around the world who saw the footage to believe they were watching some AI-generated special effects video, until it was verified as real, which then left them gaping in shock, internally exclaiming, "Damn." The appearance of these videos further fueled the firestorm of news about the war's outbreak, sparking widespread discussion. Damn! The Jekka Group is awesome. They just went straight to war. I've read the battle report. The helicopter combat group made a low-altitude breakthrough, destroying several important camps and airports, resulting in the loss of over 100 fighter jets and complete loss of air superiority. The losses for Chan Country and Japan were devastating. What's the deal with those super soldiers? Did they take some super soldier serum? Their physical strength is too high. F***CK. No wonder they fought so smoothly. The other side was clearly cheating. With the power of those super soldiers, and they're wearing bulletproof battle armor, how could ordinary soldiers possibly win? Where can I buy that battle armor? I want to get a set for my collection. The news said those super soldiers are biochemical soldiers, transformed by taking some drug. Japan still dares to send troops into Chan Country? They won't admit defeat. When the 8-nation group acts together, even if the Jekka Group took some early advantage, they'll be flattened by the overwhelming forces eventually. Endless debates raged online as everyone turned into a military expert, sharing their opinions on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Among these, the emergence of super soldiers caused the loudest discussions. People were very curious. This was the first batch of super soldiers to be formally commissioned globally, and no other country had yet developed their own super soldiers. While the Jekka Group's super soldiers achieved remarkable battle results, countries around the world, almost simultaneously, stepped up or initiated research on super soldiers to acquire these inhuman troops. After all, the immense combat capabilities of single soldiers, especially for special operations missions, were far too appealing. It could be said that the emergence of super soldiers overturned all previous experiences in the field of special operations around the globe and initiated a complete transformation. However, these countries and organizations wanting to develop super soldiers like the Jekka Groups either had to research gene potions themselves or investigate strengthening pills. Influenced by this, prices for strengthening pills skyrocketed on the international black market. For the countries researching super soldiers, obtaining the gene potion was virtually impossible, while the strengthening pill provided some hope. However, they were unaware of something called the blood marrow crystal. What they saw as hope was nothing more than a mirage. While discussions about the war that had erupted in Chan Country were rampant overseas, various regions of East Chin State were also preparing for war. On the streets of Monday City, many citizens spontaneously took to the streets, carrying various banners and slogans, donating money and goods to the Jekka Group. Boycott the threat from the 8-nation group. The victor will surely be ours. I want to donate money. This is 10,200 Hua Yuan. Please give it to the Jekka Group for me, and hit those Chan Country government army and Japanese bastards hard. I want to sign up for soldier training. Please let me enter the barracks. Su Jie drove through the streets and saw the figures of enthusiastic citizens everywhere on the road. The people of East Chin State were mostly supportive of the war between the Jekka Group and the Chan Country government. Having experienced the chaotic and exploitative rule of the Chan Country government, the people knew the goodness of the Jekka Group. These citizens of East Chin State would say anything rather than see the Jekka Group lose and return to the rule of the Chan Country government. Seeing the scene outside, Su Jie's mouth harbored a smile. With such support, we simply cannot lose this war. The car continued on its way to Nightmare Park, which was still open at the time. However, due to the onset of war, foreign tourists dared not enter the war zone, and relying only on the population of 3 million in East Chin State, coupled with less desire to play during the war, Nightmare Park became quite desolate. At the core of the park, Su Jie found the ghost bride, Han Ruyan. Inside an old house of ancient style, a graceful figure was sitting quietly by the pond, watching the koi swimming below, somewhat looking lonely and desolate. My lady! Su Jie walked up and sat beside Han Ruyan. Han Ruyan tilted her head slightly, her hollow and lifeless eyes conveying, My lord, the number of elemental spirit stones has decreased a lot recently. Because there's a war, Nightmare Park lacks tourist spending. I came to find you for this matter as well. War? Is it necessary for me to kill people? Han Ruyan's eyes slightly shimmered, seemingly intrigued. The instinct of a fierce ghost compared to collecting fear emotions through rent from Nightmare Park, they still prefer the simple and brutal method of collecting through killing. Yes, come have fun with me on the battlefield. Call all the fierce ghosts over, and I'll select a few suitable ones to take along. Upon hearing this, Han Ruyan swiftly summoned a host of strangely shaped, bizarre fierce ghosts in front of Su Jie and herself. This one's not bad. It still looks somewhat human. This ability is barely acceptable, count it in. TSK, it looks too filthy. Better stay in the ghost house to scare tourists. Su Jie picked and chose, quickly selecting a batch of fierce ghosts that met the requirements. Since Su Jie did not want to expose the existence of the fierce ghosts just yet, and the complex environment of the battlefield could easily reveal their presence, the ghosts Su Jie chose had to meet several requirements. Good at disguising, indistinguishable as human or ghost, strong killing ability, no survivors, and high adaptability on the battlefield, knowing how to destroy bodies and traces, leaving no evidence. With these conditions met, Su Jie would select them. Let's choose these. In the end, Su Jie picked a squad of fierce ghosts, ready for the upcoming battlefield mission. When do we depart? Han Ruyan took out the flower sedan chair transformed from the Heavenly Ghost map and packed all the fierce ghosts inside it. Right now. Su Jie took Han Ruyan's cold jade hand and led her away from Nightmare Park. Oh, October 20th. Jiwei City. By now, the Jekka Heavy Synthesized Brigade had occupied Jiwei City for 3 days, and this capital of Ji State was immersed in a somber atmosphere of war. After days of preparation and fortification, bunkers, concrete obstacles, and underground tunnels crisscrossed the city. On the streets, furniture-blocked stairway entrances, barbed wire and remote-controlled explosive devices stood ready. Various cars, buses, and construction vehicles were moved to the streets and overturned to obstruct enemy armored vehicles or infantry movement. Barricades blocked roads, snipers awaited in concealment, armored units hid throughout the city, and infantry maneuvered in combat, forming an entire urban defense system. In the morning, Valenkin did not stay in the hidden underground command post but came to a high rise, holding binoculars, observing the outside activity. The enemy is about to attack. Confirm the targets are the Chan country's 1st Armored Brigade and the 3rd Mechanized Division? Valenkin, tireless in his inquiry, knew this was crucial for the upcoming defense. Commander, there's no mistake, it's those infantry who can't walk fast. Now it's these 2 units that have rushed over. The staff officer responded, nodding in confirmation. It seems the enemy is eager to break through Jiwei City's lifeline. Valenkin put down his binoculars and said in a stern voice, "Notify everyone, prepare for battle, and let the Chan Country Army understand that we're the nail they can't pull out." Understood. Oh. Outside Jiwei City, a large group of Chan Country soldiers was assembling here, with the rumble of artillery fire marking the start of the urban siege. The Chan Country government wanted to break through Jiwei City to rescue 50,000 soldiers surrounded inside Ji-State. These two units advanced from their barracks with substantial firepower. Following the artillery strike, the second wave was not ground troops but drones launched into the air. Under the signal enhancement of the communication relay drones, they flew towards many bunkers and windows on the edge of the city. Chan Country itself didn't have any drone production capability. These drones were all previously supplied by the 8 Nation Group, which also trained numerous drone operators for Chan Country. The drones being deployed were mainly suicide-style crossing drones and consumer-grade multi-rotor drones. By mounting hand grenades, mortar shells, anti-tank rockets, and self-destructive explosives, they could be used for reconnaissance, surveillance, and attack missions. They could not only strike infantry but also target the weak spots of tanks such as the rear and tracks, destroying armored units. However, as these drones approached Jiwei City, they began experiencing varying degrees of remote control signal disruption, and the video transmission became intermittent. The closer they got, the more severe the signal interference became, until finally the drones disappeared without a trace. Even the drones' magnetic compasses malfunctioned, making it impossible to discern directions. Most of them spiraled down to crash or hit walls, returning to Mother Earth. This left the Chan Country Government Army's drone operators completely bewildered, speculating that Jekka Group had set up a large number of countermeasure devices to cause the interference. The group's gadget is really useful, Valenkin praised repeatedly as he watched this scene through his binoculars. Behind him, in the room, a machine was operating. It looked like a drone jammer, and indeed it was, only it had been enhanced a bit by Ghost Bride. In more common terms, it had been enchanted. Han Ruyan had the ability to block signals. When she attacked the Siam CIA's base, she disabled the entire base's ability to communicate with the outside world. Since drones are controlled and send images via radio, interrupting the signal is like flying a kite, and if the string is cut, you no longer have control over the kite. The method Ghost Bride used to enchant these drone jammers was simple. She added some ashes from Paperman into them, boosting the jammer's power. It sounds incredible and utterly unscientific. But creatures like Fierce Ghost, with their bizarre and outrageous nature, are inherently beyond human comprehension. When these enchanted drone jammers were turned on, the approaching drones were doomed. Even the drones with some anti-interference capabilities, in the face of these enchanted jammers, could only crash disastrously. With the drones obstructed and ineffective, Chan Country could only deploy ground troops. Large numbers of armored units, cautiously advancing under the cover of infantry, pushed towards Jiwei City. By then, Jiwei City had already been transformed into a fortress of war. These Chan Country troops entered the urban area and were immediately subjected to heavy fire. At a window ledge, 2 Jekka soldiers felt the vibrations beneath their feet. One of them, serving as an observer, was looking through a hollowed-out hole in the wall, watching the enemy movements outside. A total of 8 infantry, 1 tank, 30 meters away. Get ready. The observing soldier raised his hand while the soldier next to him, holding a rocket launcher, crouched and hoisted the launcher onto his shoulder. Now, blow it up. The soldier with the rocket launcher, upon hearing the command, quickly popped his head out from the ledge. What came into view was a tank passing down the street, flanked by several accompanying infantry. Bang! The rocket was fired. Without looking at the result, the 2 Jekka soldiers quickly retreated. Behind them, a loud explosion erupted as the rocket hit the side of the tank. The rocket's metallic jet penetrated up to 600 millimeters of homogeneous steel. Chan Country's outdated tanks, mostly not equipped with explosive reactive armor, had side armor plates only 60 millimeters thick, which were utterly inadequate for protection. After the explosion, a small hole appeared on the side of the tank, but the crew members inside were severely wounded by the metal jet, killing 2 instantly, leaving the other 2 critically injured. The tank moved a meter or 2, spewing black smoke. Its hatch opened, and the tank driver struggled to crawl out. The belatedly aware Chan Country soldiers then vigorously opened fire toward the window ledge, and some even attempted to storm the room. But as soon as they entered, they triggered the trap mines set up there, shrapnel piercing through flesh as cries of agony rose. In another location, a hidden sniper positioned himself within a high-rise building. Tipasang, age 22, had become a glorious super soldier after passing the physical adaptability screening by using strengthening pills. Although only a third-class super soldier, he couldn't match the second-class super soldiers who could swallow 3 to 5 strengthening pills, let alone those wearing impenetrable battle armor and mowing down enemies like cutting grass. But within this heavy composite brigade, he was still a well-known ace sniper. Little darling, come a bit closer. Chewing gum, Tipasang, who had no assigned spotter, always preferred to operate like a lone wolf. Through his sniper scope, he saw an infantry platoon searching through the block, hoping to secure it and establish a foothold for the Chan Country army. Dozens of men were checking every building and floor slowly, not only inefficiently but also exposing themselves under the sunlight. Tipasang didn't fire blindly. Instead, he contacted the self-propelled howitzer unit in the rear and reported the enemy's position. Without much waiting, 3 152mm shells smashed into the street district 3 minutes later, instantly killing half of the infantry platoon on the spot in a bloody scene. The surviving soldiers were dazed and confused by the explosion, unable to tend to the wounded before Tipasang made his move. Click! A round was chambered into the sniper rifle, and the next moment the trigger was pulled. A bullet shot out of the barrel and, in less than a second, drilled into the eye socket of a Chan Country soldier several hundred meters away, blowing away half of his skull. Enemy attack! Where is the enemy? I don't know. The bullet seemed to come from that direction. The group of Chan Country soldiers shouted loudly. Some quickly sought cover, while others picked up their rifles and began firing wildly in the general direction. Tipasang, unhurried, pulled the bolt again, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a new round. Bang! Another soldier's head burst open, dying a gruesome death. Tipasang calmly fired shot after shot, almost never missing, precisely sniping Chan Country soldiers. The remarkable 5 senses and physical qualities of super soldiers made each a match for ace sharpshooters. Many soldiers couldn't figure out where the shots were coming from and were bewildered when their heads exploded. After several shots, Tipasang packed up his sniper rifle and moved to another sniping point, because he didn't know whether his position had been exposed. If exposed, what awaited him was not an enemy sniper duel but most likely an artillery strike from the enemy. Thus, he couldn't linger in one place, for even super soldiers could not withstand a shell hitting them. Meanwhile, on the streets, those Chan Country soldiers continued to hide behind building covers, daring not to move. In the complex and changing urban environment, the fear brought upon the soldiers by a sniper was even stronger than that by armored vehicles. At least with the latter, one could understand where the enemy was attacking from, while with the former, one couldn't even see the person. For kilometers away from Tipasang, an armored personnel carrier of the Chan Country government was driving down the street, its crew in a panic. They had just been attacked by an anti-tank mobile squad. Fortunately, the several rocket launchers and anti-tank missiles aimed at them missed, allowing their escape. In a blind panic, they took a wrong turn on the city road and became lost. As they passed a street corner, they were unaware that a dangerous hunter had set his sights on them. In a street-facing shop of a building, the roller shutter of the first floor rose, revealing a heavy composite brigade's tank hidden inside. As the tank slowly turned its turret, its front half drove out of the shop and the cannon aimed at the armored vehicle, firing a shell swiftly. Boom! In an instant, the personnel carrier was turned into a pile of scrap metal. All crew members killed. After confirming the kill, the tank slowly reversed back into the shop, pulling down the shutter and waiting for the next prey. Similar scenes were playing out across Jiwei City, lacking the intelligence and reconnaissance vision provided by drones. The Chan Country soldiers who plunged into the fray were caught off guard. The battle for Jiwei City began on October 20th, signaling that the war between the Jeka Group and the Chan country government had escalated intensely. The Jeka Group's heavy synthetic brigade was stationed in Jiwei City, once again reinforcing their defenses tightly, staunchly blocking Chan country armies' attempt to capture the city. The city's complex terrain was inherently advantageous for the defenders. Streets and alleys were deadly traps for attackers, with defenders ready in strong formations, able to launch attacks from all directions. Hence why urban warfare is also called war in hell. The soldiers of the Chan country government were not exceptionally elite, and currently lacking air superiority, they struggled to strike against the heavy armor and artillery of the synthetic brigade. With drones rendered useless and a severe lack of intelligence gathering, they could only rely on the soldiers' eyesight to scout the city. Such circumstances naturally resulted in the waiting Jeka soldiers beating them brutally. Especially with the presence of super soldiers, elusive and sudden, they often caused many Chan country soldiers to panic and flee helter-skelter, with some so intimidated that they surrendered en masse. Not just the soldiers from Chan country, but even world powers have found little solution to urban warfare. Whether it was the bloody, brutal city battles between Detzi and Mauzi last century, or the urban security struggles the beautiful country's military faced in the Middle East in the 21st century, all had suffered severely and failed to devise effective strategies. Artillery, give me a massive barrage. I must take Jiwei City, never mind the civilians, he commanded. Faced with such desperate and urgent circumstances and the pressure from the Eight-Nation Group, especially the threat of aid cut off by the beautiful country, the Chan country high command completely lost their senses and issued a shocking order. Following this command, the Chan country soldiers disregarded international laws and indiscriminately launched a massive barrage. Any area suspected of harboring Jeka Group forces was bombarded without hesitation, regardless of whether civilians were still present or not. Although a portion of Jiwei City's civilians had left before the war, many residents found it hard to leave their homeland. These citizens thought this civil war would be like past skirmishes between the government army and the warlords, perhaps a few shot exchanges and hiding in the jungles, not posing much threat to them. However, when the Chan country government indiscriminately bombarded Jiwei City, even within Ji-state they controlled, many civilians realized their mistake. The war was far crueler than they had imagined. And the soldiers, who should have been nurtured by their taxes and meant to protect them, chose instead to bomb their unarmed civilians. Videos of these events uploaded by some war journalists to the internet immediately caused an uproar, with the international community and online public opinion overwhelmingly condemning the Chan country government. However, the Chan country government, disregarding this, continued their relentless bombardment. But trying to destroy a city with artillery took too long. By the time they had shattered the city, the 50,000 soldiers trapped within Ji-state would have already starved. Faced with this situation, all the Chan country government could do was to send even more soldiers into Jiwei City amidst the intense bombardment, to fight for control. By now, Jiwei City had almost turned into a merciless meat grinder of life, with Chan country soldiers and Jeka soldiers dying every moment. To hasten the capture of Jiwei City, the Chan country government brought in more troops continuously, attacking day and night. This action indeed proved effective after paying a significant price. Facing the staunch defense of Jeka soldiers and the slaughter by super soldiers, the Chan country government paved a path with lives, capturing some streets and buildings in the city, occupying some high points, and were no longer on the defensive. With only 10,000 soldiers in the heavy synthetic brigade and facing enemy forces far exceeding their own numbers, even with the geographical advantage in super soldiers, as the Chan country government pressed on regardless of losses, casualties and losses became inevitable, forcing them to further contract their line of defense. Just as the battle for Jiwei City was in full swing, an unexpected guest arrived. Jiwei City, Jeka Group's underground command post. Valenkin, utterly baffled, looked at Su Jie, who walked in through the main entrance, his mind slightly overwhelmed. Mr. Su, how did you get here? This place is too dangerous. No, I will arrange for someone to escort you out immediately, he said. Valenkin was truly frightened. If anything were to happen to Su Jie here on the battlefield, he'd be torn apart by the Jeka Group from top to bottom. Su Jie waved his hand and said, Don't worry about safety. I came here because I heard that the Chan country government has been particularly aggressive. Yes, that's correct. The Chan country government has brought in the 8th Armored Brigade, a helicopter squadron, and 5 infantry divisions from within their territory to seize Jiwei City, now attacking our defenses day and night, and many of our streets and buildings have been taken. But please rest assured, Mr. Su, our heavy synthetic brigade is confident we can hold on. Without a month's time, they won't even think about taking Jiwei City, he assured. Valenkin guessed the reason for Su Jie's visit. Could it be that he thought they weren't managing the war well and had come to hold them accountable? He also knew his task was very important. Now, 50,000 soldiers trapped within Ji State were stretched at Jinlao Mountain, facing encirclement and bombardment by several other Jeka brigades, continual attrition of those Chan country troops' supplies and ammunition. And those 50,000 soldiers, lacking ammunition and supplies, could still hold in the fortified trenches and reinforced concrete of Jinlao Mountain. But once they stepped onto the open fields, they would be devoured by the Jeka group in no time. Jiwei City was now the focal point of the battlefield, and also the core city that the Jeka group and Chan country government were desperate to capture. If the Jeka group held out, those 50,000 Chan country soldiers would only be trapped and killed in Jinlao Mountain, ultimately annihilated by the Jeka group. Once successful, the Jeka group would easily occupy Ji State, an industrial stronghold within the territory of Chan country, whose output and economy accounted for 30% of Chan country's national economic output. A critical concern for the Chan country government. And if the Chan country government reopened this lifeline through Jiwei City, it could supply those 50,000 soldiers with logistics and ammunition, and might even push forward into East Chin State. Which area is the most fiercely contested right now? Su Jie turned around and looked at the map of Jiwei City hanging on the wall. The map was annotated in different colors representing the areas occupied by the two sides, with blue representing the Jeka group occupying 3/4 of the city and red representing the Chan country government army's quarter. Valenkin did not dare to delay, quickly saying, "The fiercest and most brutal fights are in several areas including Lianxin Hospital and its nearby blocks, Lingyuan Building, Luan Street. These areas all have great strategic significance, and we are currently caught up in repeated tug-of-wars over these places with the Chan country government, with many areas changing hands several times." Su Jie stroked his chin thoughtfully and nodded, saying, "Then things should be easy. Let's pull our soldiers out of these areas and stop competing with the Chan country soldiers for them." "What?" Hearing this command, Valenkin's mouth dropped open, unable to close for a long time. Thinking Su Jie had not understood his earlier meaning, Valenkin anxiously, his face turning red, said, "Mr. Su, these places are critical vulnerabilities. Among them Lingyuan Building is the tallest in Jiwei City with a high-end CBD area around it full of high-rise buildings. If taken by Chan country, they would be able to monitor our troop movements from a higher vantage point. And Liyuan Street is a critical junction separating our 3rd and 4th regiments. If Chan country soldiers take it, the connection between these two regiments would be severed, and then there's Lianxin Hospital. I understand what you are saying. We are not truly giving up these territories, but there is no need to sacrifice the lives of our soldiers. We have a better method of taking them," Su Jie said with a smile, looking at the personnel he had brought with him. Following Su Jie's gaze, Valenkin also saw these people accompanying Su Jie. One woman wearing sunglasses, with pale skin and an inexplicable chill emanating from her, was too intimidating to stare at for long. Behind this woman stood figures draped in large black robes, nearly obscuring their entire bodies. These mysterious figures also had an indescribable aura about them. Upon seeing them, Valenkin felt his heartbeat slow down and goosebumps rise on his skin. Could these be first-class super soldiers? If we use first-class super soldiers to take these positions, even if they succeed against heavy firepower, the casualties would be significant. Valenkin thought of the existence of the first-class super soldiers, having only heard of this unit's reputation. This unit, belonging to Su Jie's steel camp, was very secretive, and Valenkin had not seen them in person. But even as first-class super soldiers, Valenkin knew they were few in number, an absolute trump card of the Jeka group. Such sharpshooters should be used for special missions, Squandering them on large-scale frontal battlefields would be a great waste. If the Chan country government knew first-class super soldiers were attacking, they would definitely do everything possible to bombard them indiscriminately along with their own soldiers. With a light chuckle, Su Jie spoke up to clarify, "They are not first-class super soldiers, but another special unit. In terms of combat power, they are even stronger than the first-class super soldiers. They can take the positions you all have been fiercely contesting." Valenkin was stunned again. A unit even more formidable than super soldiers. The outside world had been saying that Jekka Group was conducting biochemical research, which he had somewhat doubted before, but hearing Su Jie say this, he began to suspect it was true. First-class super soldiers already seemed freakishly superhuman. How terrifying then must be a unit even stronger than them. Valenkin felt his heart rate increase and his scalp tingle at the thought. "The commander of this unit, you can call her Miss Han, but don't bother her unless it's necessary. She doesn't have the best temper. Just know that as long as she's in charge of the territory, you can be absolutely reassured." Su Jie pointed to the ghost bride beside him. Valenkin's eyes followed, and he locked eyes with her. Even behind sunglasses, Valenkin was so frightened that he instinctively stepped backwards. He felt as if he saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood in her presence. All right, I understand." Valenkin nervously swallowed his spit, having no choice but to trust in Su Jie's promise, hoping that this unit was as powerful as Su Jie claimed. Su Jie stroked Han Ruyan's jet-black hair and said, "Tonight, I leave it to you." Han Ruyan did not speak, only looking outwards, waiting for the sky to darken. Night was the best disguise and provided the perfect hunting time for fierce ghosts. Behind her, sensing the numerous fresh blood and corpses in the city, the group of fierce ghosts had started to grow restless, craving to go out and slaughter. Night had fallen on Luyuan Street, silent but for the lingering scent of blood around the noses of those present. Stationed on this street were 300 men from the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment, under the 6th Infantry Division of the Chan Country Army. Also present was the 7th Tank Platoon from the 1st Armored Brigade, which consisted of 4 tanks and 2 armored infantry vehicles. These soldiers had not relaxed their vigilance with the arrival of night. On the contrary, they became even more tense and serious. This was because Luyuan Street had always been a key area of contention between Chan Country and the Jekka Group. Many fierce battles broke out on this street, and control of the area frequently changed hands. Many of these battles erupted at night when, despite having night vision and thermal imaging, armored units were severely limited in their field of vision. In an urban environment, they were often destroyed by infantry that managed to approach them unnoticed. "It's 1 in the morning. Has the Jekka Group given up on attacking tonight?" Wu Taimin, the commander of the Chan Country Army units stationed on Luyuan Street, muttered to himself, sitting in a room that had been cleared out, feeling no urge to sleep. "Camp Commander Wu, could it be that the Jekka Group has deemed the casualties too high and decided it's not worth it, so they've simply given up?" The deputy camp commander spoke up. They had recently taken over the watch, and the previous Chan Country troops stationed on Luyuan Street had been left decimated and forced to withdraw for rest. In the deputy camp commander's view, the attacking side in an urban battle was bound to suffer losses. It was understandable that the Jekka Group, with fewer troops, would be reluctant to continue the attrition on Luyuan Street. "It's possible. Then it seems we've picked up an easy job." Wu Taimin chuckled and sighed with relief inwardly. The combat effectiveness of the Jekka Group's troops, particularly those of the super soldiers, was something he had experienced firsthand. Especially at night, they would emerge like ghosts, often inflicting crushing defeats on the Chan Country Army. If they could take over Luyuan Street without a fight, it would undoubtedly be good news for Wu Talai. As the two discussed, unbeknownst to them, the true attacking force had already neared their position that very night. In the corner of a partially collapsed building, a big bearded soldier was crouched down for a pit stop. In the darkness, the Chan Country big bearded soldier cursed while squatting, saying, "What the hell is logistics sending us? Is this stuff even edible? They dine on delicacies every day up there, while we risk our lives down here eating this dry food." Not a single hot meal to help my upset stomach. After emptying his intestines, the big bearded soldier shook his trousers, picked up the rifle at his feet, and turned to head back to his position, when suddenly, a flash of green caught the corner of his eye. What? The big bearded soldier tilted his head in surprise when he realized the green light was actually a pair of eyes, which gave him quite a start. What the hell, a wild cat? Running around like crazy in the middle of the night. The big bearded soldier mumbled to himself, assuming it was the eyes of a wild dog or cat, which can indeed glow green at night. He didn't think much of it and headed back to his infantry squad with his rifle. But after just a few steps, he suddenly heard synchronized footsteps behind him as if someone was following. Who's there? Who's that? The big bearded soldier quickly turned around, but saw nothing. Even the green eyes he had just seen had disappeared. Faint moonlight fell from the sky, and visibility was quite good that night. For some reason, as the big bearded soldier looked at his empty surroundings, a sense of unease unsettled him, and his mind filled with all sorts of terrifying rumors he had heard. The so-called darkest hour is just before the dawn, a prime time for murder and arson. In both Eastern and Western cultures, the night has always been associated with words like horror and terror. Westerners imagined vampires, while Asians believed ghosts roamed at night. At that moment, the big bearded soldier couldn't help but think of ghosts, and goosebumps sprouted on his arms. Surrounded by moon-shadowed buildings and roadside trees, and occasional gusts of wind stirring up strange noises, the big bearded soldier's legs trembled as he walked. Subconsciously, the big bearded soldier started to quicken his pace, wanting to run back to his infantry squad. Almost as soon as the big bearded soldier started to move, the eerie footsteps echoed synchronously behind him. This time, the sound seemed even closer, as if barely a meter or two away. The big bearded soldier turned back in panic, still seeing nothing, but there was no mistake about the sound. Hardly daring to breathe out, the big bearded soldier was so frightened he felt like his heart, lodged in his throat, might fall out at any moment, and in sheer terror, he instinctively ran towards his comrades. Boom! 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 The footsteps grew nearer, almost sticking to his back, completely in sync with his own. The abnormal heaviness of those footsteps, unlike those of any regular person, sounded like a small drum beating incessantly. Cold air brushed his neck as if someone were breathing on it, driving the big bearded soldier to the brink of hysteria. Don't come any closer, stay away. The big bearded soldier's screams echoed far in the still environment, alerting nearby soldiers who readied their weapons vigilantly. The infantry squad to which the soldier belonged also heard the commotion and then saw the big bearded soldier running their way. The squad leader cursed, "Ah Sang, what the hell are you screaming about in the middle of the night? Have you lost your mind?" Squad leader, "A ghost? There's a ghost." The big bearded soldier's lips trembled, feeling a growing chill on his back, his whole body nearly freezing in place. "You haven't been drinking today. You're out of your mind. Demoralizing the troops? Careful or I'll beat you to death." The squad leader's eyes bulged, his face full of speechlessness. The soldiers nearby burst into laughter upon hearing this. "Ha ha! Ah Sang, you're such a scaredy cat. Hee, where's the ghost? Come out and let me see. I've never seen a ghost before in my life. Let me have a look and broaden my horizons. Maybe it's a pretty female ghost. Perfect for a little excitement." The group of soldiers laughed so hard they bent over backward, completely not taking it seriously. The big bearded soldier saw more people gathering and, listening to the mocking laughter of his comrades, started to doubt his own judgment, wondering if he was just hallucinating from lack of sleep. Even if it's a ghost, with so many comrades here, fierce ghosts are supposed to be afraid of healthy adult males. I don't believe it dares to harm people now. Muttering to himself, the big bearded soldier turned his head again. But this careless look turned his eyes wide and his body uncontrollably began to tremble violently. That's because a terrifying ghastly figure, tall and thin with a death hook in hand, eyes glowing green, was staring straight at him. Its sinister and horrifying face, its eyes emitting an endless oppressive force from within their eerie green glow, a bone-chilling aura radiating from its body, almost made one hear the sound of their own teeth chattering. It was as if the ghost had followed him and come to the center of Liyuan Street. "Ghost! There's a ghost behind me! Squad leader! Shoot! Shoot now!" The big bearded soldier kept retreating, but his words only made his comrades laugh even louder. The squad leader looked incredulous and cursed. "I think you've really slept yourself stupid. There's no such thing as ghosts. You're dreaming in the middle of the night. Time to wake up." In the middle of speaking, the squad leader was about to slap the big bearded soldier. Just then, a splash of scalding liquid hit his face. The squad leader froze, only to see the big bearded soldier's chest had been nearly completely torn open, with a long death hook piercing through from the front, blood splattering all over him. Thump! The big bearded soldier's viscera spilled out through his torn chest, and he fell dead on the spot. The nearby soldiers, eyes widened, stared in disbelief at what was happening. They hadn't seen anyone at all. That death hook seemed to have materialized out of thin air. "Ghost! There are really ghosts!" Someone shouted first, and the soldiers woke up as if from a dream, their faces pale with panic as they frantically pulled their triggers, trying to shoot at the fierce ghost, whose whereabouts were unknown. Bang! 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 Bullets fired all around the big bearded soldier, ripples starting to spread through the air as if they actually hit something. But their actions also brought death upon themselves. The terrifying death hook burst through a soldier's neck, decapitating him along with his head. Rip! One by one, chains with sharp hooks emerged from nowhere, spearing through the chins of soldiers, the bloody tips piercing through their foreheads, and all the soldiers in the platoon were suspended upside down, hanging from the streetlights. Hearing the gunfire, all the soldiers stationed on Liyuan Street were alarmed. High-powered searchlights were immediately directed there, and tank crews started their tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. The soldiers also armed themselves with rocket launchers and heavy machine guns, ready to respond to a night raid by the Jekka group. Yet, when the searchlights shone over, the Chan country soldiers didn't see any Jekka soldiers. Instead, they saw a dozen of their comrades hanging upside down from the streetlights, their blood dripping steadily, forming lines as if they were slaughtered pigs being bled. "What is this?" Before these soldiers could grasp what was happening, one of them screamed in agony. He was entwined by a long chain around his neck, pulled dozens of meters into the air, flailing wildly as he hit an advertising board above a street, hanging there, struggling and slowly suffocating. As the soldier faced death, he saw a tall, eerie figure standing above the billboard. It seemed that only by making physical contact with this fierce ghost could one see its figure. Rasping breaths, with fingers trembling wildly, the soldier seemed to want to alert his comrades, but the lack of oxygen made it impossible for him to do so, his struggles slowing down and gradually fading to stillness. "Ghost! There's a ghost!" This desperate and terrifying scene almost shattered the soldier's perception of reality. At the same time, the sounds of the death hook piercing flesh rang out incessantly on Liyuan Street. "Jekka group attacking? Are there any super soldiers? Make sure the troops below are careful. Get ready to call for rear heavy fire support." Wu Taimin was alerted, thinking that Jekka group had launched an attack under the cover of night. But as he stood on the balcony looking towards Liyuan Street, he saw only his troops getting pierced by black death hooks that abruptly appeared. The random bullets fired by the soldiers were ineffective, as if an invisible being was hunting them. "Commander! Commander! There are ghosts, we've been cursed." The deputy commander rushed up in a panic, his face as white as a sheet. "I saw it." Wu Taimin's heart was racing. Although he wasn't superstitious, what he saw before him was telling him that the world was not as straightforward as he thought, and that such things as fierce ghosts really existed. After calming himself slightly, Wu Taimin assessed the situation and commanded, "Use explosives, we can't see the ghost. We can only try to use explosions to see if we can damage it." As he spoke, Wu Taimin picked up the walkie-talkie, preparing to notify his superiors and the nearby Chan country army, informing them of the situation here. However, what baffled him was that all communication devices seemed to be severely interfered with and utterly incapable of transmitting any notifications outside. Wu Taimin did not know that, near the corners of Liyuan Street, pale and bizarre papermen had appeared, directly blocking all outgoing communication signals. Meanwhile, on the street, soldiers who had received the orders began trying to attack the invisible enemy with rocket launchers and flamethrowers. Although the enemy was invisible based on the length of the Black Death Hook's chain, the source of the enemy could be estimated. At the scene, soldiers were continuously dying, and explosions and bursts of flames occurred. In the high heat flames of the flamethrowers, people saw a tall, thin ghostly shadow in the fire. "It's a fierce ghost, he's there," the soldiers shouted with a mix of alarm and delight as multiple tanks at the scene identified the target, and high explosive bombs continuously hit the revealed tall and thin ghostly shadow, causing violent explosions that mistakenly injured nearby soldiers. But the soldiers could no longer concern themselves with that. "Is it dead?" After the explosions, the scene turned quiet again, and no more soldiers were killed by death hooks. After a brief silence, the soldiers couldn't help but smile with the relief of having survived a calamity. "We won, we killed the fierce ghost. Even the fierce ghost can't withstand cannons. We've avenged our fallen comrades." As the soldiers hugged each other and wept with joy, inside a store, a tall and thin ghostly shadow missing half of its body appeared there. The ghostly shadow's mouth was wide open, seemingly absorbing something, and its body underwent a slow transformation. The originally 2 meters tall body, its dark form slowly writhing, gradually elongated to 3 meters, teeth sharp as knives, and its green pupils turned dark red, making the tall and thin ghostly shadow more terrifying and intimidating than before. Just as the transformation following the promotion had completed, this tall and thin ghostly shadow moved again, bizarrely appearing in front of a tank. Rust appeared on the surface of the tank, and the tall, thin, ghostly shadow completely ignored the physical barrier, melding into the steel of the tank like ink. Inside the tank, the crew's shouts of shock and anger erupted, along with the smell of decay. Meanwhile, Wu Taimin, thinking the battle had ended, was walking towards the command vehicle, preparing to leave by vehicle to notify his superiors. By the time he reached inside the command vehicle and was about to have the tank column escort him, he saw that of the 4 tanks in the tank column, 3 showed no signs of activity, and he immediately realized something was wrong. "That fierce ghost isn't dead. It's attacking our tanks." Wu Taimin pointed to the last tank, which was beginning to rust. As soon as his words fell, he suddenly felt intense pain in his limbs and couldn't help but scream in agony. The scream didn't last a second before Wu Taimin lost consciousness. Hearing the familiar screams, the Chan country soldiers on Liyuan Street were dumbfounded. With gazes full of fear, they saw many comrades, including their own battalion commander, whose bodies were gruesomely dismembered by several death hooks wrapping around their limbs and necks. The tall and thin ghostly figure not only survived but became even more terrifying than before. Seeing even tanks getting destroyed, the soldiers of Chan country on Liyuan Street broke down, crying and running in all directions. Facing the super soldiers from Jekka Group, they still dared to confront briefly, but with the fierce ghost it was too much of an anomaly. The confrontation just now had drained their courage, and now seeing the fierce ghost reappear, the remaining courage receded like the tide, leaving only the instinct to run, driven by fear and the will to survive. What these soldiers didn't know was that they hadn't even left Liyuan Street when pale papermen floated through the darkness, gruesomely joining the hunt. The scent of death wafted through Liyuan Street, which had become a hunting slaughterhouse for the ghosts. 2 o'clock in the morning. Lingyuan Building. This was the tallest building in Jiwei City, surrounded by similarly tall buildings. This area, composed of CBD buildings, was the high-end financial and commercial center of Jiwei City. At this time, this area had fallen into the hands of the Chan country government, specifically into the hands of Japanese soldiers from the 1st Airborne Regiment. The 3 units initially sent by Japan, the 13th Self-Defense Force, were decimated at Wuha Military Camp, and the Mixed Aviation Brigade was bombed at Putuo Airport, rendering all warplanes unusable. Only this 1st Airborne Regiment remained fully combat-capable. As the Chan Country government attacked Jiwei City, they called on this only unit currently in the Chan Country territory to aid. To maintain Ally morale, Japan didn't refuse and dispatched this elite paratrooper unit. 2 days ago, they landed on the rooftops of the CBD area via helicopters and, in coordination with ground forces, seized control of the region. Although at great cost, taking over the area around Lingyuan Building demonstrated their strength to their allies in Chan Country, proving they weren't as ineffective as at the start of the war. Now, the 1st Airborne Regiment still stationed here found the area's high buildings very suitable for helicopter landings. Coupled with the really elite paratroopers that were far more adept tactically than regular soldiers, and with armed helicopters providing heavy firepower, they had resisted 3 counterattacks from Jeka Group and held their ground until now. Under the veil of night, darkness enveloped the entire city, with streets littered with various car wrecks and debris from consecutive days of warfare. A cool breeze fluttered the leaves of roadside trees, whispering softly. Stationed here, Japanese soldier Xiao Yi Rilong yawned as he exchanged duties with a rotation guard and crouched behind a sandbag bunker, checking a machine gun stationed there. Perhaps due to lack of sleep, Xiao Yi Rilong felt the night was unusually deep, the distant buildings eerily spectral in the shadows, and a faint odor of decay wafted through the dark, making one's entire body uncomfortable. What a weird smell, Xiao Yi Rilong muttered, arranging the machine gun and pulling up the ammo belt. He then raised his head unconsciously and rubbed his eyes. For he saw that, unbeknownst to Wen, several red lanterns had been hung on the street lamps. The lanterns, adorned with big happiness characters, swung back and forth in the night breeze, casting a strange, blood-like red glow. Accompanied by queer blowing sounds, a lavish flower sedan chair appeared in view, made of red silk and embroidered on all sides with festive patterns like 100 years of good harmony, dragon and phoenix bringing auspiciousness, a happy full moon, and 2 swallows flying together. In addition to the 8 strong men carrying the sedan chair, there were many other figures nearby, resembling a wedding procession with a stretching line of red attire, a grand procession with colorful flags, playing swanas, striking cymbals and carrying tall lamps, all following the sedan chair, bringing a festive and joyful atmosphere. Xiao Yi Rilong's mouth hung open, stunned by the massive wedding procession advancing toward him, which was far too terrifying. This place, there can't possibly be anyone holding a wedding here, Xiao Yi Rilong thought to himself, and as the procession drew closer, he could see more clearly, and suddenly, all his body hair stood on end and he involuntarily stepped backward. For the procession beating drums and playing music was not composed of living beings, but consisted of pallid papermen. The ones carrying the flower sedan chair were 8 towering fierce ghosts, completely devoid of any human traits. Ghosts! I've encountered ghosts! Fear silenced Xiao Yi Rilong, his mouth agape, unable to scream. A pallid paperman seemed to have noticed him, its blank facial features embodying the uncanny valley effect, inducing extreme fear in onlookers. Whoosh! The corners of the paperman's mouth slightly turned up, its body fluttering like a dry leaf and paper in the wind, suddenly appearing in front of him. Xiao Yi Rilong finally snapped back to his senses, and, faced with life or death, he summoned the strength in his limbs, drew his pistol from his waist, and frantically fired at the paperman. Bullets perforated the paperman, creating large, see-through holes. Its head, chest, and thighs sported holes the size of fingers. However, the paperman showed no response, as it wasn't a flesh and blood body and thus didn't possess the vulnerabilities of humans. It merely resembled a human but was far from as fragile. When Xiao Yi Rilong's magazine emptied, the paperman had already closed in, its hand piercing straight into his abdomen. "Save me! Help me!" Pain shot through his abdomen, turning Xiao Yi Rilong's plea into a scream. The nearby Japanese soldiers were in a similar state, not that they didn't want to help, but because they too were being targeted by papermen. The eerie smile on the paperman's face grew even stranger as it withdrew its hand from the body and continued its advance. Behind him, Xiao Yi Rilong clutched his bleeding abdomen, instinctively searching for a blood post, but his movements stiffened mid-action. fear on his face slowly replaced by a tranquil expression, eventually becoming blank. Click! Xiao Yi Rilong turned and chased after the paperman. With each step, his skin flaked off like aged plaster, revealing the snow-white paper underneath, turning him into a paperman. Around the perimeter of the Lingyuan Building CBD, these patrolling paratroopers had all been transformed into new papermen, but the sounds of gunfire during their resistance also alerted the main force of Japanese soldiers inside. Between the high-rise buildings, the paratroopers of Japan's 1st Airborne Regiment quickly readied for battle, aiming their guns and cannons toward the incoming papermen. As two flares descended from the sky on small parachutes, illuminating a kilometer-wide area, the Japanese soldiers could clearly see their incoming opponents were not the anticipated Jekka warriors but rather, these grotesque and eerie papermen usually found in horror stories. Open fire quickly. Damn it. Whatever these things are, just kill them all for me. If you don't want to die, blow these ghostly things up. The officers were also in fear, but as elite paratroopers, they maintained their composure better than the regular soldiers, quickly overcoming their brief moment of shock and did not forget their military training, instructing the defense troops to fire. Bang! 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 A fierce metallic storm ensued. Rifle bullets, submachine gun bullets, machine gun bullets, and even machine gun fire, a dense barrage enveloped the papermen. Facing this fierce barrage, some papermen were shredded, their bodies torn into paper scraps filling the air. Particularly those armored vehicles firing 25mm caliber machine guns, which could blast palm-sized holes through the papermen with each shot. Though still not enough to kill a paperman with one hit, the damage was significantly greater than ordinary bullets. The papermen moved quickly, and another group with various holes already bore through them stormed the Japanese defensive line, immediately beginning their slaughter. The papermen's hands transformed into spear-like shapes, easily piercing through human bodies, whether the soldiers wore bulletproof vests or not. Every soldier who had their body pierced and came into contact with the blood of the papermen would be transformed into a new paperman in no more than 10 seconds, turning around to attack their own comrades. Zombies, they're zombies. Idiots. Just kill them. Those are our comrades. They are no longer human. Don't be soft-hearted. Do you want to get everyone killed? Damn it. The soldiers were terrified by the papermen's method of attack, their ability to infect reminding them immediately of zombies from movies. But these papermen were far more terrifying than any zombie. Zombies are just flesh and blood and can be killed with a shot to the head. But a paperman could not be killed unless its body was completely destroyed. More and more soldiers realized that these ghosts would not reason, and they could only be eliminated through slaughter. After the chaos, the commander gathered all the heavy artillery. In addition to various bullets, the deployment of tanks and armored vehicles reached the battlefield. The tanks fired high explosive bombs, obliterating the papermen immediately upon impact with devastating explosions. The M3 cavalry armored vehicles, aside from firing machine guns, also launched TOW anti-tank missiles one after another. The missiles, trailing flames, pursued the papermen and exploded tremendously, blowing away even some of the uninfected soldiers, with limbs and body parts scattering everywhere. The sky resonated with the humming sound of spinning propellers as multiple armed helicopters shook their rocket launch nests incessantly, releasing intense bursts of aerial rockets that exploded, creating a sea of fire hundreds of meters long, instantly reducing the papermen to flying ashes. These papermen are afraid of fire. Attack with fire. An officer had discovered the weakness of the papermen and decisively used the radio to instruct the soldiers to switch their weapons. Flamethrowers came into play, their long tongues of fire engulfing the papermen in flames, and soldiers threw white phosphorus hand grenades, igniting and searing their bodies as the ghastly white phosphorus continuously burned through them. As more and more heavy firepower was deployed and their weakness exploited, it took less than 10 minutes for the last paperman to be shattered by a rocket launcher. The scene was in disarray, merely a wave of papermen's assault. Even though the Japanese soldiers had ultimately eliminated the papermen, they suffered immense casualties because of the terror of the papermen's infectious capabilities. The bombardments were relentlessly executed regardless of any collateral damage, leaving many Japanese soldiers to die by friendly fire. These weapons, quite interesting. Inside the flower sedan chair, Han Ruyin lifted the sedan curtain and watched the smoke-laden battlefield, showing no sign of remorse over the extinction of the papermen. That was just a trivial ability of hers, modified toys through the heavenly ghost map. If desired, she could summon more at any time. This celebration, a send-off for themselves, huh? Hearing the cheers of the Japanese soldiers, Han Ruyin initially did not want to act personally. However, her husband specifically instructed her to annihilate this group of Japanese soldiers, not letting a single one escape, which is why she had arrived here in person. Glancing at the armed helicopters flying low hundreds of meters in the sky, Han Ruyin raised her left hand, making a grasping gesture. Up in the sky, within the cockpits of the helicopters, a terrifying scene unfolded. All of the helicopter pilots, without exception, had their clothes transformed into red wedding dresses. The wedding dresses, as if embedded into their flesh, constantly absorbed their blood and life, tightening ever more until it turned them into dried corpses in the blink of an eye. With the pilots unable to control them, the flying armed helicopters naturally could no longer sustain flight. A group of Japanese soldiers were startled by the fierce winds overhead, panicking into a sprint. Yet an armed helicopter wobbled towards the ground. Its high-speed spinning propellers like mowing razors flew in their direction, instantly claiming the lives of 7 or 8 Japanese soldiers who did not escape the area, cleaving them at the waist. Dozens of helicopters either crashed into the earth or collided between high-rise buildings. None were spared. The resulting explosion shrapnel also killed and injured many Japanese ground paratroopers. The Japanese soldiers who had just considered themselves victors over the fierce ghost were dumbfounded, realizing that the situation was far from over. "The rest is up to you." Han Ruyin turned and walked back to the flower sedan chair, the remaining Japanese forces no longer requiring her personal intervention without those helicopters. Roar! Hiss! Heh! Beside the flower sedan chair where Han Ruyin was located, one fierce ghost after another looked in the direction of the Japanese soldiers and slowly began to step forward, commencing the cleanup. The Japanese soldiers near the Lingyuan building soon discovered that fierce ghosts, even more terrifying than the papermen, had appeared. In the sky, red lantern ghosts floated mysteriously. The big red lanterns radiated festivity, the character for wedding clearly visible on them. A Japanese soldier walked beneath a lantern, his body suddenly freezing, his flesh transforming into wax. His comrades, oblivious, only realized when they accidentally bumped into him, causing his entire body to melt into a puddle on the ground. Other soldiers' necks suddenly opened with a line of blood when they looked up at the lanterns. With a stupefied expression, their heads detached from their necks, floating leisurely towards the lantern ghost, turning into a new human head lantern, while their headless bodies toppled dramatically after a quiver. The sight was staggering. Curiosity led many Japanese soldiers to look up, resulting in several hundred human head lanterns appearing in midair. Even those inside tanks and armored vehicles, who through periscopes gazed at the lanterns overhead, had their heads similarly transformed into head lanterns. Stuck inside the cramped tank cabins, these head lanterns bounced about wildly, terrifying the other crew members to a pallid fright. Don't look up, or your head will fly. The remaining Japanese soldiers finally understood, shouting in utter terror, their faces deathly pale. For a wedding feast under 10,000 lights, open any door and see the bridal sight. A towering figure, carrying a red lantern, emerged leisurely in front of the Japan Self-Defense Force, his steps neither hurried nor slow, as if leisurely strolling, slowly advancing towards the Japanese position. The fear among the Japanese soldiers reached its peak. All sorts of arms, light and heavy, covered the lantern ghost immediately. In the intense explosions and fiery blazes, the lantern ghost disappeared, leaving only a red lantern rocking and rising into the sky, mingling with the other lanterns. These red lanterns continuously dipped and rose, ensnaring any neck that came into their path, harvesting the heads. The Japanese soldiers tried to resist, but even if bullets could knock down a lantern, they did nothing to stop it. With an overwhelming number of lanterns, only the flamethrowers could slightly restrict them. But they still could not stop the lantern ghosts' massacre. Almost every second a Japanese soldier's head was harvested. The Japanese paratroopers who had not been broken by the paperman could no longer contain the fear in their hearts at this moment. Ignoring the reprimands of their officers, as one after another, soldiers abandoned their positions and turned to run towards the rear. No, 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 we simply can't win. We will die if we stay here, we will surely die. A Japanese soldier, his eyes filled with terror, had even discarded his rifle, only caring to cover his head and rush towards the rear, abandoning his comrades who were still holding the line. In the glass curtain wall on the street, a woman in a white dress, with a graceful figure, appeared on the glass, her gaze hauntingly fixed on the fleeing Japanese soldier. As if sensing this gaze, the Japanese soldier subconsciously turned his head toward the glass curtain wall, and then his eyes met those of the woman in the white dress. Ghost! A chill ran from the soles of the Japanese soldier's feet to his forehead, and his legs started to tremble uncontrollably, gripped by an inexplicable fear. The woman in the white dress seemed very normal, yet the fear she brought was no less than that of the red lanterns. The body of the woman in the white dress eerily penetrated through the glass, transitioning from two-dimensional to three-dimensional. Her steps appeared slow, yet were frighteningly quick, and with a single step she covered dozens of meters, half a step and she was right in front of the Japanese soldier. "Ha! I don't believe it. I don't believe you can kill me." The Japanese soldier had been scared out of his wits, his eyes full of madness as he raised his fist to smash at the woman in the white dress. His fist was as if it struck the air, passing directly through the body of the woman in the white dress. At that moment, the body of the woman in the white dress turned semi-transparent, like a mirror, and the Japanese soldier's arm extended directly into her body, as if falling into a mirror. And in the mirror, one after another, women in white dresses with the same figure and face, grabbed his arm, slowly dragging him into the mirror. The Japanese soldier wanted to struggle, but he couldn't resist that force. The other fleeing Japanese soldiers who saw this scene felt their scalps explode. Some fired their guns wildly at the woman in the white dress, shattering her body like a mirror. Thump, thump, thump. Knocking sounds came from the side. This group of fleeing Japanese soldiers turned their heads and saw, in the glass of a shop nearby, the Japanese soldier they had seen earlier was in the glass. It was as if he was trapped inside, his face full of pleading and crying as he knocked on the glass, trying to escape from that world. A group of soldiers swallowed hard. Inside the glass curtain wall, new women in white dresses appeared one after another, still and quiet, walking from the glass into reality. Bang! Some soldiers chose to open fire directly, afraid that the ghost in the white dress would come into reality and drag them into the mirror world as well. The glass curtain wall shattered with a crash. Before these Japanese soldiers could breathe a sigh of relief, the sound of more and more footsteps arose. The figures of the painting woman appeared in those smashed glass shards. Nearby skyscrapers, those towering buildings hundreds of meters high, all used glass curtain walls as exterior walls. Now, the figure of the painting woman appeared on each of these glass facades. 10, 100, 1,000 painting women continuously appeared in reality, capturing all the Japanese soldiers they saw and pulling them into the mirror world. The soldiers of Japan's 1st Airborne Regiment despaired, with lantern ghosts ahead and painting women behind. These two extremely terrifying ghosts had nearly blocked all their escape routes. These paratroopers completely collapsed. No one dared resist anymore, only thinking about escaping this terrible ghost-hunting ground. But it wasn't just the lantern ghost and the painting woman. These two 5th-grade fierce ghosts that had been deployed, many lower-grade ghosts also joined in. In the alleyways, there were female ghosts with disheveled hair, eyes flickering like ghostly flames, arms sticking to the walls like spiders, emitting a cold aura all over, their eyes filled with spite, staring out of the darkness, inducing bone-chilling terror. She lay in ambush like a spider, quietly hiding in the alley, waiting for prey to come her way. When panicked Japanese soldiers ran into the alleys and bumped into this female ghost, they would be dragged into pitch-black houses. Accompanied by the sound of chewing and screaming that was unlike any human voice, bodies were brutally dismembered. There was a butcher ghost holding a huge bone-chopping knife, his body fat and flabby, with excess flesh hanging on his over 2-meter-tall frame. This butcher ghost had set up a cauldron of oil, sharpening the blood-shiny bone-chopping knife while leading a few dogs that were as robust as lions. Upon seeing Japanese soldiers, he would take the initiative to attack, unleashing the ferocious dogs to chase, capture, and tear the soldiers apart. Once the dogs brought the prey back, he would use the bone-chopping knife to slice the bodies in half. There were also hanging ghosts swaying inside houses. Many Japanese soldiers tried to enter buildings to hide, only to smell the strong stench of rot. Then their necks would be entwined by hemp rope. Their bodies hung from the ceiling, keeping company with a hanging ghost. Some Japanese soldiers tried to kneel and beg for mercy, but ghosts were not human. They were not swayed by emotions. Facing these begging soldiers, ghosts would only use their methods to absorb the fear, leaving behind only corpses after they departed. Ghost after ghost indulged in a killing spree at the Lingyuan building. Since entering Blue Star, their suppressed desire to kill was completely unleashed at this moment. Corpses were strewn everywhere, the area filled with the wails and cries of Japanese soldiers. If this 1st Airborne Regiment of Japan had dared to bravely resist, relying on various heavy weapons, perhaps they could have taken down some low-grade ghosts. But those who ran, in the face of ghosts, these inhuman terrifying beings, without mutual cooperation, were as fragile as insects, perishing miserably under the brutality of the ghosts. This slaughter did not last very long, less than 10 minutes. Soon, the entire area around Lingyuan building fell silent, and all 1,500 elite paratroopers of Japan had become sustenance for fear. On the rooftop, the ghost bride, having consumed a great deal of fear energy, allowed the night breeze to sway the hem of her skirt. The blood-red wedding dress on her body grew increasingly vivid. Jiwei City, Lingyuan building. When Valenkin received the message and came over with his subordinates to take over, what he saw was a scene akin to purgatory. In this area of the building complex, there were destroyed and twisted helicopters and armored vehicles everywhere. Some tanks had overturned, some had exploded with their hatches open, and rolling flames were still not extinguished. In front of the open square of Lingyuan building, the bodies of over 1,000 Japanese soldiers were piled up, forming a small mountain of corpses. The fire spread over the mountain of bodies, gradually burning these corpses to ash. At some places the fire had not yet reached. Valenkin saw with his own eyes that some bodies had limbs broken, some heads had flown off, and some were completely chopped up, with not a single intact body part to be found. The pungent stench of blood was nauseating. It could be seen that the faces of many Japanese soldiers as they died were filled with bulging eyes and terror, and it was unknown what they had seen before their deaths. Mr. Su, the entire 1st Airborne Regiment of the Japan Army, all dead. Valenkin felt his voice trembling slightly as he spoke because such a military achievement was too astonishing. He had not been without attempts to dispatch forces to retake Lingyuan building, but after trying twice he had been repelled. This paratrooper unit was indeed elite. Su Jie stood shoulder to shoulder with Han Ruyan at this moment and smiled upon hearing this. Your eyes do not deceive you. I've said before that the night operations were to be left to Miss Han. She would be responsible for dealing with the enemy forces. Swallowing hard, Valenkin was inwardly shocked. Miss Han, I hope we can cooperate more in the future. Valenkin glanced at Han Ruyan, who still had the same icy demeanor, but thinking of her mysterious unit that had easily eliminated more than 1,000 Japanese paratroopers, he felt a genuine awe for such combat power. Although she was secretive, for the heavy combined brigade stationed here, it was undoubtedly great news. All right, take your men to handle those equipment and ammunition. There is still a lot of usable equipment. Don't waste it. Su Jie dismissed Valenkin and said to Han Ruyan, How about it? Isn't this battlefield quite suitable for you? Han Ruyan nodded slightly. Killing provides more fear energy than scaring people. I hope it can continue like this. It's only during wars that there are so many opportunities, not on ordinary days. Su Jie reached out and held Han Ruyan's hand. Because he was bound to Han Ruyan through the 9 nether ghost cultivation technique, Su Jie could sense her condition. At this time, Han Ruyan, having absorbed a large amount of fear energy, was like a kettle about to be filled to the brim, on the verge of completing her promotion to a 6th grade fierce ghost. Han Ruyan withdrew her hand and said indifferently, "It will take some more time." A smile appeared on Su Jie's face. "I'm about to break through as well. Let's see who advances first." Yang City Command Center, the highest officer of the Chan Country Sakura Army, Major General Yoshimura Yuichi, was trembling as he held the telegram. Looking at the report about the 1st Airborne Regiment going missing, his eyes were bloodshot as if he were about to devour someone. "What do you mean missing? More than 1,500 members of the 1st Airborne Regiment, so many soldiers, and it's not just 1 or 2. You're trying to fob me off with missing?" Slamming the report onto the table, Yoshimura Yuichi's voice almost seethed through clenched teeth, scarily cold. Now, the only Japan Army troops left in Chan Country were the 1st Airborne Regiment, and then they mysteriously went missing. How could he accept this? They were not ordinary troops but elite paratroopers, whose combat strength was top-notch even in Japan. Facing Yoshimura Yuichi's anger, the staff officers and intelligence personnel exchanged looks, their faces filled with bitter smiles. "General Yoshimura, this incident might be inseparable from Chan Country's involvement. Our airborne regiment went to help them capture the city, but they didn't fulfill their responsibility, leading to the disappearance of our 1st Airborne Regiment. Someone quickly had the idea to first shift the blame to the Chan Country government. Yes, if it weren't for the incorrect command of the Chan Country government, how could our 1st Airborne Regiment face mishap? We should never have sent our troops to Jiwei City. Those Chan Country government definitely used the Airborne Regiment as cannon fodder. They handed over the most dangerous Lingyuan building to our Airborne Regiment to defend, leading to this failure. We demand an explanation from the Chan Country government. Our soldiers can't just disappear without a trace." The other staff officers in the command room lit up and began to echo the sentiment. After a defeat in the last battle, many at the command had been demoted and dismissed. If this time the disappearance of the 1st Airborne Regiment was blamed on them, who knew how many would be held accountable? Yoshimura Yuichi's expression softened slightly, but he was still furious. How is the investigation into the 1st Airborne Regiment going? How could they suddenly go missing without any message getting out? "General, according to our investigation, our 1st Airborne Regiment is not the only unit that suffered mishap. Last night, a total of 4 stationed units in Jiwei City mysteriously vanished. Indeed, nearby Chan Country soldiers heard gunfire, but no communication came out. The soldiers sent to investigate also disappeared. In just one night, as many as 2,500 soldiers went missing. We suspect that Jekka Group used electronic warfare suppression and most likely mobilized Steel Camp to attack. There might be some new technology we are unaware of. Those missing soldiers have likely died heroically, and the areas they belong to have been recaptured by Jekka Group. 3,000 men, gone overnight without any news getting out." Yoshimura Yuichi inhaled sharply. The casualty figures were staggering. Can that Steel Camp really accomplish this? I recall the Chan Country government has quite a few new armored units. Can those first-class super soldiers hold up? Yoshimura Yuichi was somewhat skeptical. After all, they're but flesh and blood. They surely can't withstand machine gun fire. We're still investigating. The movements of the Steel Camp are very secretive, and we haven't obtained precise information yet. Figure out what's going on as soon as possible. If we can't determine how the enemy managed to do this, I'm afraid we won't be able to capture Jiwei City according to the planned schedule. Yoshimura Yuichi ordered, then sighed as he looked at the eager staff officers below him. I'll explain the situation back home. The disappearance of the 1st Airborne Regiment this time is not our responsibility, but the result of the Chan Country government's irresponsibility. Upon hearing this, many military staff officers breathed a sigh of relief. Additionally, the 9th Division, 7th Division, and Aviation Mixed Group newly dispatched from home, totaling 22,000 soldiers, will arrive in Chan Country in the next 10 days. I reckon we won't be able to take Jiwei City, and G-State will most likely fall into the hands of the Jekka group. We cannot accept this outcome, so we must be prepared for the upcoming battle. This Jekka group is even more troublesome and fearsome than we expected. Yoshimura Yuichi shifted to another concern. As the Chan country government army was blocked from aiding Jiwei City and G-State faced imminent danger, the eight-nation group became anxious. The countries coordinated with each other to assist Japan in transporting soldiers and equipment. Otherwise, transporting a 20,000-strong military force from thousands of kilometers away by sea would not be possible in such a short period of time, given the troubles and preparations involved. Excellent, with these 20,000 troops, especially once the fighters reach Chan country and we regain air superiority, the advantage in this war will return to us, said the officers below, their spirits uplifted. The extreme difficulty of this war so far was 90% due to losing air superiority at the outset. If we had air control, that heavy combined brigade of the Jekka group, traveling across the plains toward Jiwei City, would have been bombed to ruin first, instead of being like it is now, a nail in our side that has led to the encirclement of 50,000 Chan country soldiers. With the arrival of 20,000 elite troops, we will make sure the Jekka group is wiped out. Gentlemen, may you have the fortunes of war. Yoshimura Yuichi stood up, his expression serious. Yes, long live the Emperor. The group of staff officers stood up, their faces fervent. The struggle for Jiwei City continued, and since the turn of the new century, this siege has been one of the most brutal urban battles. Countless countries are watching intensely, looking to learn from the experiences and lessons, to refine and specially train their own armies. On the internet, both the Chan country government and the Jekka group upload videos of the ongoing battle daily, drawing the attention of the onlookers. Is Jekka group's electronic warfare systems really that powerful? Not even a drone can get close to Jiwei City. Have you seen the sniper Tipasang from the Jekka group? His first-person sniper perspective? His accuracy is unreal. Shot after shot, headshots. I've heard his kill count has surpassed 200. Almost rivaling those legendary snipers from World War II. The Chan country government is bogged down in urban warfare. Their indiscriminate bombing of military and civilian targets isn't achieving much. Large areas of the city are still in Jekka group's hands. Look at the news. Japan's 1st Airborne Regiment has been wiped out. Haha, delightful to hear. While everyone discussed enthusiastically, half a month passed in a flash. The Chan country government continued to deploy troops to contest Jiwei City, but the effects were negligible at best. Especially during the last half-month's offensive, nighttime became a nightmare for those Chan country soldiers. It was not just the transition from day to night. The enemies they faced shifted from human to the inhuman fierce ghosts. At first, the Chan country soldiers were bewildered, but gradually, they came to their senses. Although they did not know how the Jekka group managed to annihilate regimented defense forces without leaking a whisper of news, those Chan country soldiers no longer wished to stay in Jiwei City at night. The Chan country army indeed made efforts, such as establishing a relief system and sending telegrams every 10 minutes, but this still failed to prevent the wholesale disappearance of entire units. When one unit lost contact and the relief forces arrived at the location, they only found a scene strewn with corpses, or even the relief forces themselves would go missing. In the end, even the Chan country government could not sustain such losses. Having the stationed forces suffer casualties ranging from a few hundred to over 1,000 nightly was unsustainable, no matter how resourceful one might be. Eventually, the Chan country government had to relinquish parts of Jiwei City they had occupied, and these areas were retaken by the Jekka group. The offensive became increasingly feeble. In face of the tremendous losses, the morale of the entire encircling Chan country army around Jiwei City crumbled, and they could no longer pose a credible threat. When the Chan country government abandoned the attempt to capture Jiwei City, the 50,000 elite Chan country soldiers besieged in Jinlao Mountain met their doom. Jibong Jinlao Mountain. 50,000 Chan country soldiers found themselves in a desperate situation with no ammunition and no food. Those who could be sent to the front line to confront the Jekka group were the most capable veteran units of the Chan country government. But even the most capable units, faced with a lack of food, water, and exhausted ammunition, would inevitably head towards defeat, whether they were a modern army or an ancient one. Within the trenches of Jinlao Mountain, a short figure rolled in, clutching two struggling field mice in his left hand, his dark face brimming with a smile. "Old Pooh, Tangerine, Afong, everyone come over quickly. Look what good stuff I've caught." Dua excitedly held up the field mice, but the joy on his face didn't last for more than a few seconds. Upon seeing the sorrowful mood of his comrades in the bunker, he seemed to understand something. "Squad leader, the squad leader." Dua's hands trembled slightly as he saw a sealed body bag added to a corner of the bunker. 5 days before, the squad leader who had always taken care of him had gone to make trouble at the logistics officer's place to get food and was injured when being dispersed by the discipline enforcement team. The wound got infected, and lacking food and clean drinking water, he kept having a high fever. "He didn't make it." A comrade's voice was low. With the ongoing siege and continuous bombardment by the Jekka group, soldiers often either got blown up by shells or died due to the lack of water, food, and medicine on Jinlao Mountain where the Chan Country Army was stationed. Those who were blasted to death were the minority. Hidden in the bunkers, unless hit directly by large-caliber howitzer shells, they wouldn't have anything to worry about. More soldiers died of various diseases. In such a tropical rainforest environment as Chan Country, October was the time of scorching weather, and high temperature with frequent rainfall was the norm. The constant high temperatures baked the soldiers hiding in the bunkers and trenches, making them like a group of moles trapped in a sweltering steam box. Both their physical strength and will were enduring torture, with people suffering from heat stroke at every moment. And sometimes after the high temperatures, there would be days of continuous rainy weather, turning the trenches into a muddy mess. This hot and humid environment led to many soldiers developing various skin diseases. The most common was jungle rot of the feet. Lacking medicine, they could only watch helplessly as their feet rotted away bit by bit. Even more soldiers became ill after eating contaminated food and drinking rainwater, leading to various kinds of diarrhea, high fever, and dehydration. Now, the field hospitals were no longer accepting patients, and the sick soldiers had to fend for themselves. If they could hold on, they lived. If not, they died. Can we still win this war? Dua sat in despair on the muddy ground, his eyes full of confusion and helplessness. Before the war began, Dua's unit, the 5th Infantry Division of the Chan Country Government Army, an elite among elites, had faced off against warlords in the jungle on many occasions, boasting a commendable record. Dua initially thought this deployment would be like any other, but they ended up trapped on Jinlao Mountain with daily bombardment and torment from hunger and sickness, completely wearing down the morale of these soldiers. Win? Unless the government manages to break through Jiwei City. Otherwise we'd have to stake our lives to win. A nearby soldier muttered as he started a fire to roast the 2 field mice. Several soldiers sat around swallowing their saliva, their eyes almost glowing green with hunger. Hunger was another problem for the Chan Country Army on Jinlao Mountain. They started with 3 meals a day, then 2, and now it had come down to 1 meal every 2 days, and that food was so bad even dogs wouldn't eat it. The lower-ranking soldiers, with growling stomachs every day, had no choice but to seek out game to supplement their diet, risking being blown up by Jekka Group's shells, like Dua. But the ecosystem of Jinlao Mountain was not sufficient to support the consumption of 50,000 famished troops. After many days, the ground had been scraped bare, and finding any kind of game, let alone a mouse, was top-notch, and people had now started to gnaw on tree bark and wild grass. The Chan Country government had also tried airdropping supplies, but how much food could that deliver? When divided among 50,000 people, it wasn't enough for even 1 meal. Latterly, they had even lost several cargo helicopters to the Jekka Group's portable air defense missiles. And since then, no more airdrops had been seen. "Hey, starting a fire will cause smoke. Do you want to attract shells and get us all killed?" A roar came over, and the group of soldiers roasting field mice turned to see 2 members of the discipline enforcement team approaching. As there had been numerous cases of disorder and desertion lately, these discipline enforcement teams were intensifying their patrols, showing no leniency to deserters they found. Seeing the 2 roasted field mice, their eyes immediately lit up, and they hurried over. Sorry, we're just too hungry. You see, it's broad daylight and we're in thick jungle, the smoke isn't that visible. We'll put out the fire as soon as we finish roasting. An older soldier stood up, trying to smooth things over. Humph, if everyone acted like you, what would be the point of rules? The discipline enforcers stamped out the fire and then picked up the 2 field mice, saying, "We're confiscating these as a lesson for you." Although these discipline enforcers ate slightly better than the ordinary soldiers, they too were starved and couldn't resist the temptation of roasted field mice. A group of soldiers were so angered by the actions of the 2 discipline enforcers that their faces turned red and then white, unable to utter a word for a long time. But Dua wasn't ready to let it go. Thinking of his deceased squad leader, he reached the peak of his anger, his eyes flashing with an uncontrollable rage, his facial muscles twisting ferociously as his hand reached for his rifle.